Do it at the meeting. Good morning, and welcome to the regular Board of County Commissioners meeting of Tuesday, July 16, 2013. We'll begin with an invocation by Deputy Teddy Floyd from the Indian River County Sheriff's Office, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Vice Chairman Wesley Davis. Please rise.
I first want to say to all our commissioners, I'm thankful for you. In the wake of this morning when we looked at the devastation over all the counties, I'm thankful for the leadership and the guidance that you provide for us. And just being able to stand on that wall and know that we can sleep safe at night, I'm thankful for all my commissioners and everybody in their respectable position. Let us bow our heads. Father, we thank you. We come to you as humbly as we know how, God. We're coming to you thanking you. Thank you for our families. Thank you for our community. Thank you for our commissioners. I want to first thank you for my sheriff and all the chiefs that govern this community, God. As we come to you, God, we ask that you have an open and understanding, and let us come out of here with great ideas, innovative ideas that will put Indian River ahead of every county that is in your foresight, God. And when it's over, we want to give you the praise. Let us say amen.
Amen. Amen.
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. First item on the agenda is additions, deletions. We do have an addition, item 8P, Papa, in consent by County Administrator Joe Baird and staff regarding the Elster Meter Remedy Agreement. In addition, I'd like to add underneath my matters a discussion for regular meetings in the community for county commissioners with regards to the Sunshine Law.
And Mr. Chairman, I'd like to request moving item 11E to after consent agenda. When I had offered these people to speak, they were away on vacation. When I spoke with them on Friday, they advised me of a other obligation they have to go to after here, and it would be very much appreciated if it could be moved up earlier in the agenda.
Any objections?
None.
Move agenda as amended.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Solari, seconded by Commissioner Davis. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, gentlemen. Under proclamations and presentations, a presentation on Downtown Vero Beach event by Vicki Wild, Executive Director for Keep Indian River Beautiful. Good morning, Ms. Wild.
Hello. Hello. I'm Vicki Weil with Keep Indian River Beautiful, and I'm excited to be here today. I thought I'd backtrack a little bit and just 2 years ago I started this Keep Indian River Beautiful as the executive director there, and I was awarded through Coca-Cola and Keep America Beautiful 50 Clearstream recycle bins, which are now throughout the county. We let them, anybody can use them for free. They go to the fairs, the delegate meetings, any parks or events that we're having. And they're always free to anybody who wants to use them. They just have to sign up, and then they have to return them. That's the main catch. At that same time, I also was awarded a cigarette bait tank, a cigarette receptacle. We call it the bait tank, and it looks like a fish, and it says, "Save some fish, feed me butts." So I had that put down in Vero Beach Marina, which when I first started there, we picked up 2,000 butts before we installed the machine. Now it's 2 years later, and I went back the other day, and there were 200 butts on the ground and 1,500 inside the machine. So it was actually shows that it's making a big difference. Since then, we partnered with last year the Tobacco Coalition, put an additional 10 bait tanks down, and now I'm pleased to announce this year I just was awarded 2 more. So I'm having one put downtown Vero Beach. We already have one at Pocahontas Park, but then we're going to put one downtown, more closer to like, I guess, downtown Main Street, because we figure get traffic at both ends. The other thing, we're hoping to put another one down at maybe Round Island. That's in the works as well. Now moving forward, I'm kind of excited to say that Keep America Beautiful and the Ad Council has just decided that they just designed this whole new program where it's I Want to Be Recycled. And it's exciting because we can teach all the little kids about recycling. Not only do we teach them about storm drains and runoff and everything else, but now we can teach them the journeys of a bottle, turning it into a pair of pants or a fleece or what have you. So it's a really exciting new campaign that we're doing, and you can go to iwantoberecycled.org, and it'll give you all the information. Now, since then, I just was awarded through Keep America Beautiful and Coca-Cola 5 new outdoor recycle bins, which I'm pleased to say that we are going to be having them placed in downtown Vero Beach. We figure where we have the downtown Friday nights, there's a lot of recycling there, so we figured that would be a good location. We also have Republic Service has volunteered to pick up the recycling for free for the county, so I thought that was a great idea. And we know that each American produces 4.4 pounds of trash every day, so we're trying to get the word out, let's recycle. And this goes along with that. So at the July 26th, downtown Vero Beach, we are the chosen charity of that event, and so we would like to invite you guys to all come out and join us in the unveiling of our new recycle bins. Also, the following Saturday, we have the Curb Marketplace in the mall, which is from 1 to 6, where we have our local artists and vendors, which also helps advertise our upcycled reuse exchange center in the mall, which currently now is getting an average of 200 pounds of litter or material donated to them weekly. So the numbers have increased dramatically. So it's a good program. So I just wanted to invite you guys to both of those events.
Super. Vicki, just for the audience, could you give us the time and date of that again, please?
Yes. The downtown Vero Beach will be July 26th from 6 to 9 p.m. And then the Curb Marketplace in the mall is going to be Saturday the 27th from 1 p.m. to 6 p.m.
Thank you.
Vicki, congratulations on going out and getting a lot of those innovative grants and stuff. You might also want to consider Sebastian for some of these, because they have a lot of events in their waterfront park area, and a lot of people walk in there. So if you have some extra recycle things.
I do. And when I'm up there, I always bring my clear streams with me. And from what I had heard, they were talking about already getting bins put in with their new program. So that's why I thought Vero might.
Okay.
But yeah, definitely. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Weil. Next item on the agenda is a presentation of proclamation and retirement honoring Gary Eastlick on his retirement from Indian River County Board of County Commissioners Department of Utility Services Solid Waste Disposal District with 22 years of service. Gary? Retiree Gary? And you brought someone with you?
I brought my son with me.
Son, come on up. You're going to be seeing more of him than you used to. Might as well start getting used to it. Gary, it gives me a great honor and privilege to present this proclamation honoring you in your retirement. We really appreciate your service. I know that you have taken your job very seriously, and my experience with you for many years in you helping children, educating children on what that mountain is in Indian River County is greatly appreciated. You're leaving a legacy and an opportunity for someone to shine as well as you have, and I want to thank you personally for your service to this nation as well.
Thank you.
And thank you for the legacy that we get to enjoy each day. But
if you don't mind, county commissioners may not be aware, but ever since this landfill has been open, there has never been a violation to DEP, which states a lot not only for the people that work out there, but also for the citizens of this county.
Thank you, Gary. Well, proceed with the proclamation, and then we would like to hear a little bit about what you're going to be doing. The proclamation reads as follows. It's honoring Gary Eastlick on his retirement from Indian River County Board of County Commissioners Department of Utility Services Solid Waste Disposal District, all in one sentence. Whereas Gary Eastlick is retiring from Indian River County effective July 25, 2013, and whereas Gary Eastlick began his career with Indian River County on April 26, 1991 as a Maintenance Worker 3 for the Solid Waste Disposal District, SWID. He was promoted on July 5, 1991 to Heavy Equipment Operator 1. On July 15, 2005, he was promoted to SWID foreman and continued in the capacity until his retirement. Whereas Gary Eastlick brought his experience as a United States Army veteran and a former Piper employee to the various operational aspects of the solid waste and recycling industry. He served with utmost professionalism, gaining respect from regulators, engineers, contractors, other departments, and the general public. Whereas Gary Eastlick has served this county and the public with distinction and selflessness. During his years of experience and service, he was dedicated, and his work was greatly appreciated by his employer, his citizens, and co-workers alike. Now therefore be it proclaimed by the Board of County Commissioners of Indian River County, Florida, that the Board applauds Gary Eastlick's efforts on behalf of the county, and the Board wishes to express their appreciation for the dedication and of his service that he has given to Indian River County for the last 22 years. And be it further proclaimed that the Board of County Commissioners and staff extend heartfelt wishes for success in his future endeavors. Adopted this 16th day of July 2013. In addition, Gary, I don't know if you're going to have a little office at home, but maybe you want to put it somewhere prominently. We wanted to give you this plaque stating that this to certify that Gary Eastlick is hereby presented this retirement award for outstanding performance and faithful service to Indian River County Board of County Commissioners for 22 years of service on this 25th day of July 2013. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you.
You're up.
I'm up. Well, I'd like to thank all the county commissioners and the people of this county for letting me be a part of the county government for 22 years. It's been a privilege.
Gary, I just want you to know when you mentioned about no violations, and you know it was popular to recycle years back, and I want to thank you for being one of the innovators and the caretakers of the future of Indian River County when we were not so fast forward with recycling and having blue bins at the curbside in front of each and every home where people are fully cooperating and understanding the value of recycling. You had your projects going. I remember when we toured the facility many years ago, you were like a proud father. I thought at one point that you actually owned the landfill. So thank you for taking ownership and being a great steward for the resources of Indian River County.
Thank you.
Get a couple of plaques. You want to get them on the way back? I think your dear friend and former director is right behind you. He wants to take a picture, so why don't you take these plaques, Gary? See, it was important you brought your son up. Somebody had to hold another plaque. Thank you, Gary. And don't be a stranger. Next on the agenda is the approval of minutes, a regular meeting of June 18, 2013.
So moved.
Second.
That's a motion by Commissioner O'Brien, seconded by Commissioner Davis. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. There are no informational items next on the consent agenda. Gentlemen?
Yes.
I'd like to pull item L. Lima.
Commissioners, can we pull the holiday schedule I? Because
I Indigo, and we'll discuss that.
Move to approve the consent agenda as amended.
Second. That's a motion by Commissioner Davis, seconded by myself. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Joe, would you like to go with I Indigo first?
yes, on the holiday schedule for next year for the employees, we had being closed on Christmas Eve, Wednesday, December 24th, then Christmas Day, Thursday, December 25th. After discussion with some people, we thought maybe better not to be closed on Christmas Eve and be closed the day after, giving the long weekend the Friday. If we could change that, if the board so wishes.
I have no problem with it. My question is that going to be something that needs to be negotiated, or?
I got an email from my HR department. I asked them, and they didn't think it did. Well, what we could do is we could vote, and if the union says no, we could go back to the old schedule, just
Okay.
put it in front of them.
Sounds good. So moved.
Second.
With the change.
Thank you for any further discussion. Motion by Commissioner Davis, seconded by Commissioner Solari. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, gentlemen. I pulled El Lima. There's no refuting it. Be happy to support it. Somebody else will have to vote for approval. But this is the federal fiscal year 2013 Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Grant, the JAG approval for distribution of funds, and I know that the sheriff will put these funds to good use, and I see that Kim Poole is here. No, I'm not looking for a justification opportunity, so you won't have to explain it. As much as, we often pass bridges with people's names on it, and time has gone so far, and we forget who those names are or why we call a bridge a certain name. And I wanted everybody to know that we're counting on the sheriff to utilize the funds in the most serious way to combat the drug abuse, and partnered with another 501(c) to ensure that we have that, and to also secure this county and guard against the overt overtaking of drugs in areas of this community. But there was an individual who sacrificed the ultimate sacrifice that this name for this grant is made, and that was police officer Eddie Byrne from the 103 precinct. I brought this up because for many years I had to wear his name on my uniform in New York City, and I did not want his name forgotten. He comes from a long line of law enforcement, and his brother and parents were involved in law enforcement. And at this juncture, just to say thank you for your sacrifice is not enough. This young man was executed in his patrol car while guarding a crack house that was being taken over by the city of New York. So, it's just in memory of Eddie Byrne. Sheriff, please use the funds wisely. Thank you.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Davis, seconded by Commissioner O'Brien. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next item, as approved on the agenda change, is 14E Echo, which is the Indian River Lagoon update. Commissioner Zorn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, and thank you, fellow commissioners, for accommodating the travel schedule change. At last week's meeting, Commissioner O'Brien had presented an action plan, and at that time I asked for the opportunity to have one or more representatives from the group that's working on a in-depth, well-thought-through action plan that has been working on the base structure of how this action plan will be developed since this Lagoon Symposium back in March. The group name is Save the Indian River Lagoon Estuary Now, as a 501c3, currently going through its final formation and filing with the IRS for its tax-free status. The group's activities will also be posted on a website, Sterlen, STERLEN.org, and also a corresponding Facebook page to keep the public and others updated on the activities. Scott Stradley, who is one of the members of the board of Sterlen, is also dealing with budget issues as part of the Finance Committee with the City of Vero Beach, so he is over there this morning, so I told him I would do the introduction of Mr. Howard Ersham, who's an engineer with Creech Engineering in St. Lucie County, and Howard's going to come up and kind of give an overview of how to get to an action plan, the steps that they're going through to get to a point for an action plan to be created. And Howard, if you'd like to come up to the podium here. Also, I gave a copy to the clerk, a presentation with a cover sheet and two scope proposals, one from Creech Engineering and the other from Environmental Marine Consulting Services, Inc., the two entities kind of providing the technical expertise prior to the August 26th, 27th target date for the two-day workshop. So, Howard, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you. I think all the commissioners have these. I've given one to the clerk and to the county administrator and the attorney for the record. Thank you. Good morning.
Thank you. Thank you, Tim. Thanks, everyone. As Tim mentioned, I'm Howard Harrison with Creech Engineers. We're a civil engineering firm with several offices throughout the state. And as Tim mentioned, I'm going to kind of give you the overview of the players involved with the work group, the process that we'll be going through, the workshop that will kind of culminate the process, and then the actual deliverable, the work product. The flow chart kind of shows you the management structure of the work group. Sterling's at the top. They're the nonprofit entity that was created with private seed money to operate as the kind of the owner-client that the consultants will contract to. My role, Creech Engineers' role, is to operate as the program manager. I'm the owner's rep to look out for the interest of the client, the entity of the Sterling, to be like an owner's rep, to make sure that the goals are met, executed, so that the budgets and schedule are met. I'm supported by an environmental consultant and a facilitator. It's critical to have an environmental consultant that is intimately familiar with the complicated issues of the lagoon. And in Environmental Marine Consultant Services, and Drew Campbell, go ahead and raise your hand real quick. He's the environmental consultant that's kind of been there, done that. So he's going to kind of guide the ship in an unbiased way. He doesn't have any stake as far as what's done and how it's done. So it's important that we have that. The first order of business is to finalize the facilitator. The facilitator has a very specific role. They are the kind of the event coordinator, per se. They're the ones that are going to, that workshop, it's a 3-day workshop. Their goal is to manage that workshop and coordinate that event, structure it so it is very efficient, maximized, so all the efforts along the way are tasked properly, and then we actually reach our goal to have a final document that has key decision points that can then be moved forward to get to the ultimate goal. Once the facilitator is on board, then we're going to be meeting with all the stakeholders. There's going to be maybe 16 to 20 different stakeholders. They are an invaluable resource. They've been, most of them have been involved in the lagoon issue for a long time. We're going to extract as much information as we can, pull all the information, meet with them individually to see what their particular role is, to see what testing they've done, what resources they have, what they can bring to the table. It's critical to pull it all together. And then after we pull it all together, Drew and I are going to assemble all the information, package it up, and then present it back to all the stakeholders so everybody can share and collaborate, and a facilitator. Then the facilitator will then, who's in charge of the workshop, will then take all that information, organize it into a very structured agenda. And then on the 3-day workshop, the first day, we're actually going to give homework to some of the stakeholders. Some of that homework is going to be, because we're going to need critical information. In order to have a productive workshop, we're going to need unit price information, scheduling information. If we need more testing, well, how much is the testing going to cost? If we're looking at seagrass transplantation, what's the unit cost for that? Oysters, what's the unit cost for that? If we're looking at converting septic tanks, well, what's the cost for that? What's the time involved? We're going to need to know that information, because it won't do us any good if we're at the workshop and it's pie in the sky type stuff because it costs too much. We need that information. So the first day of the workshop is going to be taking the information, creating action items, tasking individuals to the workshop, creating work groups, kind of working through, kind of churning the information. The second day is when we roll the sleeves up and really start working. We're going to do estimating, scheduling, create tasks. We're going to create decision points. You can't make a decision unless you know what you're buying, how much it's going to cost, how long it's going to take. It's critical to map that out. Otherwise, you can't go forward. That's part of the issues we're having now is that, well, what are you going to get for X dollars? And so the idea is to package that up in a very detailed manner that's structured. And on the third day, it's going to be just a small group that's going to take the efforts from the workshop to package it into final deliverable form. And then once that final form is kind of finalized, all the information is kind of outlined very specifically that has key decision points, then that information will be brought back to the commission for their review. And that's the general overall process from now to deliverable form. So I appreciate you allowing me to explain that for you, and I can certainly go over anything that I missed.
I'd also like to mention that since the Lagoon Symposium back in March, the discussions between these two individuals, and I could say none of this is possible with the exception of, or due to a particular phone call I've got from somebody that lives on the river, and he said, I have a very selfish problem. I live on the lagoon. I can't catch fish off my dock. If you can help me catch fish off my dock, I have some resources we can put forward to make a concept a reality and move it forward. And obviously, you can have a great idea, but if there's not somebody that's willing to help put a group together, fund the group, and make it happen. And there's others involved too. It's not just one, but there is one particular person that kind of got the ball rolling. So to actually get to an action plan, the work beforehand and the work that Howard and Drew have done for the last probably 6-7 weeks, going back and forth, working on identifying if you want to get to the end, what do you need to go through to get to the end. So what I'd like to just ask is that the group's going to move forward with its plan. Targeted date is August 26th and 27th, and then bringing a document for acceptance for consideration and review by the county to see what kind of work program, what type of action plan do we end up with at the end, going through this very detailed process. And one of the key things is in talking with a lot of the different lagoon-related groups, is currently there's no place you can go to and look at and tab down what every related entity or group is doing on the lagoon. And talking with Dr. Jacoby from St. John's and other people, he's like, I kind of know what other people are doing, but I don't specifically know. So if you have a single document that we will make available to the public as well and to the other groups, this is exactly what is going on today, a snapshot of today, then because you don't want to duplicate, you don't want to redo, you don't want to kind of interfere with something that's currently going on, but you need to know what it is so that you know how to address it as you go through the process. So that's the program of how to get to the action plan as the Sterling Group has put it together, and I think it'll be a very interesting and robust discussion, open to the public, obviously working with a lot of different groups to make this happen. The participants will all be invitees. That's a critical role that was identified through legal review, and we'll also continue discussions with Pat Gleason, who serves as special counsel for open government. The purpose of it, of the stakeholders not being under the sunshine laws, many of these people work with each other on a day-to-day basis, and I can't say, hey, can you quit your day job to come, can you volunteer over here, but you can't talk to your coworker or another research associate on another item that may come up in the future on something else, because this would be step 2, and then there's steps 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 over the next couple of years where I envision this going. So that is the stakeholder plan of how to get to an action plan, and a really kind of thought through and getting down to the bare bones to figure out how do we get to the end to identify where we think we should go, and then it would be presented to the commission for acceptance, discussion, review, and then see where it goes from there.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Now, I think it's going to be fairly simple, Commissioner Zork, for the committee that you put together to operate under the spirit or the intent
Yes.
of the Sunshine Law, and treat it as though everybody is involved, and I don't want to say regulated by that, but advertise the meetings.
Yes.
Clearly the spirit of the Sunshine Law was to keep this board, or a board like this board, of talking behind in the break room,
Right.
coming out here, one making a motion, one seconding it, and one getting 3 votes to do something without public input.
Correct.
And that's the intent of it. And I don't think there's anything that you're doing there that would go down that path. And so I think that wouldn't be a problem. In addition to that, though, Commissioners, did have some recommendations come out of the Ag Advisory Committee, and I will pass these out. And specifically being the liaison to the Agricultural Advisory Committee, if you look on the very front, it's basically just a little bit about what they're interested in. The specific motion that was made is on the very back page. If you just flip it over, it's the one of the 7-0 vote. And really what it is basically just to see to it that agriculture has a voice here in the water, in the event that we go down a reservoir of some kind. The agriculture industry sees it important as far as being able to utilize that water for irrigation purposes. Ultimately, at the end of the day, where I see this going is going to be probably the water resources. If we do decide that we're going to hold some back from going to tide, what I see probably is a third of the water for human consumption, a third of the water for recreational, environmental purposes, and a third of it probably, hopefully, for agricultural irrigation. And of course, basically. Just wanted to make sure that the agriculture industry has got a seat at the table whenever we start talking about what we're going to be doing.
And also, just to follow up on,
Thanks for bringing that forward.
Commissioner Davis, too, the meetings will be noticed. Also working very closely with Scripps to document. It'll be open to the public seating for probably 150, videotape recorded for future replay use. So it will be bright and shiny on the inside, but I just can't tie the hands of the participants that really bring the true knowledge to the table. And thank you for your consideration today. Any other questions?
Well, and Commissioner O'Brien, again, this even on yours, just if both of y'all, and this kind of goes back to what concerned me the last time, is we have what you mentioned, so many people working in different directions that I just wanted this incorporated in whatever plan we decide to merge and go forward.
Counselor.
To the Commission, I've heard a lot of things today, but I just want to, about this group and about the Sunshine Law, and I've certainly read a lot about it before I started. I just want to be clear, what I've heard so far is that, first off, there's no county dollars being supplied to this organization, and I have not heard a delegation of authority, either of a governmental function or a legislative function, to this group. They're essentially an independent organization. They are wanting to, on behalf of a client of theirs, to produce some documents, study the Indian River Lagoon, conduct workshops, and then pursuant to their own direction, they want to present that information back to the Board of County Commissioners, just as any private organization may want to present to the Board of County Commissioners their action plan of whatever issue they have. The only reason why I state that is I just want to make sure, although as Commissioner Davis states, we would hope that they operate in the sunshine, they have open meetings, that they're not going to be tied directly to that, and it's certainly no delegation from this board or from this county that ties them to those requirements. That's what I've heard. I know there's just been a lot of discussion on the Sunshine Law issue.
Thank you, Counselor. Anything further, Commissioner?
Nope, that's it for today. And also the goal of the timeline of if it stays as set, 26th and 27th is the first commission meeting in September. They would present, that would be the following Tuesday after. So we're at a very near-term window of having the work product finished and presented back by September 2nd, I think, is the first meeting. That's the targeted date, subject to any last-minute revisions. But we're at a very near window, but we've done a lot of work since March to get us to that point.
We look forward to your independent research.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is public items. We have a public hearing. It's IMG Citrus's request for a small-scale comprehensive plan future land use map amendment to redesignate plus or minus 2.16 acres from IL to RM10 and to simultaneously redesignate plus or minus 2.16 acres from M2 to CI. and to rezone those two plus or minus 2.16 acres from RM10 to IL. Memorandum dated July 8th, 2012, found on pages 141 through 160. Good morning, Mr. Keating.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I'm Bob Keating. I'm County Community Development Director. This is a small-scale land use amendment and a rezoning, and essentially what it is, it's a reconfiguration of the land use designation and zoning for a piece of property. The good news is I don't have to go through the long involved procedure of a standard comp plan amendment, because a small-scale amendment's a lot different. Essentially, a small-scale land use amendment, first of all, it has to be a map amendment. It can't be a text amendment. It's exempt from the 4 times a year requirement that applies to standard amendments. With small scale, there's no state review, and there's only one public hearing by the Board of County Commissioners. A small scale amendment has to be 10 acres or fewer, and there can't be more than 120 acres per year subject to small scale amendments. But with that, this proposal does meet all those requirements, so it is a small scale amendment and you can take final action today. Planning and Zoning Commission considered the small scale amendment and rezoning at its meeting of June 13th and recommended that you approve it. And essentially what this involves is redesignating 2.16 acres from M2, which is medium density residential, 2 up to 10 units per acre, redesignating that to commercial industrial, and then rezoning that property from RM10, which is residential multifamily, up to 10 units per acre, to IL, which is light industrial. And at the same time, swapping that land use designation and zoning with another piece of property contiguous to the subject property, and that's redesignating another 2.16 acres from CI to M2 and rezoning it from IL to RM10. And I'm going to show you some pictures that make a lot of sense of this. First of all, there are 2 properties involved. The southern property is got this unusual configuration here. Basically what we're talking about, this is north of 45th Street and it's west of the FEC Railroad. This is the IMG Citrus Packing House facility here. They have a portion of their property which is partly wetlands, and it's really not usable for the purposes they want to use. But there is property to the north, and this is part of a parcel that IMG Citrus recently acquired from the school district. As you can see here, this is Gifford Middle School just to the west, and the school district sold this property to IMG, and what they're looking at is taking the 2.16 acre portion of the property that they purchased, which is designated and zoned residential, and swapping out the land use designation and zoning with the irregularly shaped parcel here that's on the western part of their existing site. The 2 different representations here show a current and a future, if you approve this, land use map designation in this area. Essentially, you can see the subject property 1 currently has a CI, commercial industrial designation. The northern property has a residential designation. With the change, if you approve it today, those will be swapped out, and you can see that by the colors of the 2. The same with the zoning. In this case, the irregularly shaped southern subject property is zoned IL. The northern property is zoned RM10. If you approve this, the northern property will be zoned IL and the southern property RM10. With this proposal, like any other comp plan amendment, whether it's a standard amendment or small scale, we looked at several factors. We analyzed it for concurrency, comp plan consistency, environmental impact, and compatibility. From a concurrency standpoint, there is no additional density or intensity because it's just a swap of land use designations and zoning, so this is exempt from concurrency. We looked at all the policies of the comp plan. This proposal is consistent with all comp plan policies. In fact, the comp plan actually anticipates swaps, and that's referenced in future land use element policy 14.3, so the proposal is consistent with the comp plan. From a compatibility standpoint, we don't anticipate any problems. Obviously, with the southern subject property going to residential, that is less intense than the current industrial, and it's adjacent to an undeveloped part of Gifford Middle, and Gifford Middle actually sold the northern property to IMG, so they're obviously okay with this. The northern property is buffered on the west side by additional property that IMG owns, and part of the property it purchased from the school district. The FEC railroads to the east, and that's consistent with industrial designated property, and it's a continuation of the IL from the south. The only place that there would be compatibility problems is on the north, and that's got the M2, RM10 designations, so we don't anticipate any compatibility issues. There aren't any environmental impacts. The northern property's already been cleared. The southern property is partly a wetland, and the reason this is occurring is so that they're not going to develop it, so there won't be any environmental impacts. So the bottom line is the proposed land use amendment and zoning are compatible with surrounding uses, consistent with the comp plan, exempt from concurrency, and there won't be any additional environmental impact. So both staff and the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend that you approve the request by adopting the ordinances that are in your backup and attached to staff report, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Mr. Keating. Any questions of Mr. Keating?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Bob, is there a way to address, and I don't know if this helps the applicant or hurts them, but to address that there's no connectivity required for 47th Street over the tracks, not having to dedicate right-of-way through that area since there's no crossover opportunities to ever cross the road in that area. So if they move forward with some type of use for the land, that they don't have address right-of-way for 47th Street that's never likely probably to exist.
Yeah, that won't be a problem going forward.
Thank you. Anything further? This is a public hearing. At this time, I'd like to open up the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak, please come forward and state your name and address for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bruce Barquette for the applicant. I practice at 756 Beachland Boulevard with Collins, Brown, Caldwell, Barquette, and Garavaglia. We don't have anything to add to that spellbinding presentation, and if you have any questions, please let us know.
Thank you, Councilor. Yeah, spellbinding. You've never gotten that before.
And I want it again.
It's all good coming from Bruce Barquette.
Bob Johnson, Carl Wynn Subdivision. Is this the first approval of a small-scale project that we've had?
It's the
under
first.
The new guidelines of the state?
It's the first we've had this calendar year. In the past, we've done a number of small-scale amendments.
I question the validity of this small-scale authority. In other words, how was the criteria established for a small-scale project? As far as this is concerned, there's been no public hearings on notification procedures, criteria for one review before the county commission, those kind of areas. In other words, this is the first one that's being established, and this would have set, to my mind, this would set a precedence for future small-scale development procedures. So, go ahead, Paul.
Bob, it's small scale because it's under 10 acres.
Excuse me?
It's small scale because it's under 10 acres.
Is there criteria for that in the comprehensive plan?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's spelled out as you have presented it?
Yes.
Actually, the criteria in the statutes in Chapter 163 that provides the criteria for what is a small-scale amendment and how it's processed. And essentially, it's processed just like a regular rezoning is. And there was a public hearing before the Planning and Zoning Commission, and we notified surrounding property owners, had an ad in the paper, and posted the site with a sign.
Now we'll conclude with this public hearing.
Yes.
Now, the next point that I have is in our agenda today, which makes me wonder whether this is a public hearing or not, is that the IMG Citrus request for small-scale comprehensive plan use changed from IL, and then we end up rezoning to the same IL. So
it's because all they're doing is moving it. They need that industrial zoning in a different location, Bob, and they're wanting to move it away from the school and closer to the railroad tracks for their operations.
It looked like the last sentence was RM10 to IL was IL to RM.
Well, that's one of those.
But in our presentation, it's reversed. So that's my question: is it the way it's written is different than the way Bob presented it? So is this what I'm saying? Is this is that just an administrative error? Or,
I don't know. I don't know whether it really matters whether you say you're moving IL to RM10 and then RM10 to IL, or moving RM10 to IL, or.
But the way I read this, it looks like we're starting out with IL and we're ending up with IL.
Exactly.
It's right.
It's a simultaneous swap.
It's
okay.
Like
so
that.
Redesignation.
All right. Thank you very much.
It has to happen concurrently. They happen for equal.
The next point that I'd like to make is we go from IL to RM10.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a notification requirement for the adjacent land use owners to be notified of that particular change, and then a time frame given, and then we go on to moving that from RM2 to CL? Each of these different categories, is there a notification, or are we just sort of bypassing all those notification requirements for rezoning and just skipping to the end result? I'm not.
No, we notified all surrounding property owners that this swap was going to be taking place and these changes would occur. We notified them of the public hearing before the Planning and Zoning Commission, and we notified them of this public hearing.
And additionally, Bob, there's a fee that goes along with this, so it's not like the taxpayers are paying for that notification either.
Right. For instance, IL to RM10. Now, somebody that's notified may want to have that notification stopped at that point, if you get my drift on. In other words, we're rezoning and then simultaneously changing it and then changing it again. There may be some public out there that would like to have it just rezoned from IL to RM10 and stopped at that point. I think that's where I'm.
Well, Ms. Johnson, I appreciate that, but all of the adjoining property owners have been duly notified as required by this change, and staff has assured that several attempts for correspondence have been made, and they did get some response,
and Mr.
with no objection.
And Bob, I think if I understood what you were saying, you're saying why don't they just, if they wanted it rezoned, why didn't they just rezone it versus do the swap? The reason for that is in our comp plan it states that until we get to a certain percentage of built out in the commercial CI zoning, we can't add to that node. This is a CI node in Gifford, and therefore we can't add to that. So the only way that somebody can expand their footprint of the CI zoning, which is the commercial industrial zoning, is to do this underlying land use until we get to the point where we need to expand that in our comp plan.
Okay, is that so? One public hearing is all that's required, and that's been in existence.
There's been other.
While you were gone, this went to P&Z.
Yeah.
And welcome back.
Yeah, by the way.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob.
And also, it's the better use for the property, moving IMG Citrus's activities towards the railroad tracks and away from the school it just makes perfect sense as well. There's a bonus.
To the Chair and to the full Commission, if I may, I know Mr. Johnson referenced an issue as to whether your agenda or the item referenced the full rezoning and the full comp plan for both changes. And in fact, I've got the notice here, and it does state that it is amending the zoning ordinance and zoning map by changing the land use designation for 2.16 acres from CI to M2, and to rezone those 2.16 acres from IL to RMD, and to simultaneously redesignate 2.16 acres from M2 to CI, and to rezone those 2.16 acres from RM10 to IL. So it did include in the notice both the rezoning and the comp plan for both properties.
Thank you, Councilor.
Good morning, Commissioners. Joseph Paladin, the President of Black Swan Consulting and Entitlement. Also, I'm speaking as the owner and principal of Phoenix Packing LLC, which is a packing house in Okeechobee, Florida. I'd like to commend Mr. Barquette and IMG and the professionalism and the way they brought this project forward. I think they should be commended, and I would ask you all to approve this, and I appreciate the manner in which they brought this forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
There you have it.
Anyone further? Public meeting is now closed.
Move to approve.
Gentlemen, second. It's a motion by Commissioner Davis, seconded by myself. Any further discussion, gentlemen? Councilor?
We actually have two different action items. I just wanted that to be clear.
Yep. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next item on that? Councilor? Oh, you're stating that it was...
There are actually two separate ordinances for that overall item.
Yeah.
Yes, but it can be inclusive in one motion?
It's always cleaner just to have two separate motions for two separate ordinances.
Commissioner, was that the land use change?
That
Yes.
was.
Okay, I'll move the zoning change.
Second.
That's a motion by Commissioner Solari and seconded by Commissioner Davis. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you for that clarification, Councilor. Next item on the agenda is public items. Councilor, if you do the honors and read them into record.
Under 10C, we have a notice of special call meeting, public hearings. A special call meeting has been scheduled for Thursday, July 18th, 2013, to conduct a public hearing and to consider adoption of a proposed fertilizer ordinance. I believe that's scheduled for 9 a.m. And then under 10C2, we have two items. There's notice of scheduled public hearings for August 20th, 2013. Providence Point Vero Beach LLC's request to rezone approximately 186.33 acres from A1 Agricultural 1 up to 1 unit per 5 acres, and RS-3 Residential Single Family up to 3 units per acre, to Plan Development Traditional Neighborhood Design, PDT-ND, and to obtain conceptual special exception plan development plan approval for a project to be known as Providence Point. And the second item is consideration of proposed land development regulation amendment to section 911.15 subsection 1 subsection D, West County Industrial Park height exemption. Those are our three total items.
Thank you, Councilor. Appreciate that. Next item on the agenda is the consideration for a water connection policy for properties lying outside the urban service area. Memorandum dated July 8, 2013, found on pages 163 through 172. Good morning once again, Mr. Keating.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Back on June 18th at your meeting, you heard from a number of residents that live along 66th Avenue south of 16th Street, and these are residents who have, by their own definition, bad water quality. And at that time, at that meeting, they indicated that they wanted to connect to a new county water line being put in conjunction with the 66th Avenue improvements, but indicated that the county regulations wouldn't allow them to do so. At that time, staff explained that the properties in question are outside the urban service area, and the comp plan doesn't allow centralized water or sewer to be provided outside of the urban service area unless the properties meet one of several exceptions that are in the comp plan. Now, the applicable regulation that comes into play here is policy 5.7 of the potable water element. And what that does is essentially it prohibits connection to the centralized water and sewer system for properties outside the urban service area unless the properties meet one of several exceptions. Now, a couple of the exceptions that apply here are, there's one exception for properties that are contiguous to the urban service area boundary. So for properties outside the urban service area but actually abuts the urban service area, that property can connect. Another exception is for properties that the health department determines have a high risk of contamination. In that case, not only can they connect, the policy indicates that the county will provide centralized water service for those types of properties. Now, at the June meeting, the board directed staff to take two actions. The short-term action that the board directed us to take was to contact the health department, find out what their criteria is for contamination, see if some of the characteristics of the water that the residents talked about at the June 18th meeting qualify for contamination, and get back to the board. On a more long-term perspective, the board directed staff to evaluate the county's current water connection policy. And both of those items are addressed in the staff report that's in your backup. Regarding the short-term issue, planning staff coordinated with the health department and determined that the health department has tested the water of some of the residents out there on 66th Avenue, and for the constituents that the health department tests for, the water does not meet the criteria for contamination. But the health department did say that there could be additional constituents that would constitute contamination, but the health department doesn't test for them, and the people would have to have a private testing company do the testing. Now, Utilities has reached out to the residents and encouraged them to talk to the health department regarding that whole issue, whether or not they should get the water tested and how that might affect the contamination determination. So that's explained in your backup, and that's the short-term issue. I have not heard yet whether or not any of the residents have successfully had testing done that showed contamination as determined by the health department. Also in the staff report, we did the second activity that you directed us to, and we evaluated the current county water connection policy. And as indicated in the staff report, the current policy serves two purposes. One, it serves a growth management purpose, and second, it serves a utility expansion, efficiency, effectiveness purpose. And just to tell you from a growth management perspective, the water connection regulations really implement the county's urban service area policies. Essentially, the urban service area serves as an urban growth boundary, and outside of the urban service area, only very low density development is allowed. Inside the urban service area, higher densities are allowed, and they're allowed because the services and facilities necessary to accommodate those higher densities are within the urban service area. And essentially, for the 20 years the urban service area has been in effect, it's provided really the criteria about where the urban service area should be expanded if it is expanded. And basically, one criterion that we look at is, are urban services available? So should higher density development be allowed in areas where urban services are there? So from the perspective that the water connection policy actually implements the urban service area requirements, it's provided a benefit from a growth management perspective in that regard. The other thing that the water connection policy does is it really relates to utility expansion, utility effectiveness, utility cost efficiency. And there is a memo in your backup attached to the staff report from Mike Hotchkiss, who until a couple weeks ago was Utilities Capital Projects Manager. And really, it identifies some of the additional costs that are associated with extending water service outside the urban service area. But from a big picture perspective, one advantage of the urban service area and the water connection policy is it really allows utilities to make good planning decisions for the future, and those planning decisions really result in cost-effective and efficient utility provision. Because of the urban service area constraints and the water connection policy constraints, the utility department knows where growth is going to occur. They have a better handle on how much demand for water, potable water, or for sewage treatment is going to be needed in the years ahead, and they can plan for that in a rational manner. And with the limitation on water service outside the urban service area, we don't have some of the problems that occur when you do that. Basically, when you get very low density development, the 1 unit per 5 acres and less dense than that, and you put water out there and you size it for fire flow, what you get is you get some problems with the volume of water and water sitting there when you've got more capacity really than you have demand, and a lot of times you don't have loop systems. And Vinnie Burke can explain that more if you have any questions. Probably I'm not the best person to address any questions regarding that, but I want to emphasize that both the urban service area policy and the water connection policy really make a lot of sense and have implications for both growth management and utility expansion. So the bottom line is the USA policy, the water connection policies have worked for over 20 years, and there's probably not a need to change them. Now, that being said, I think staff heard loud and clear at the last meeting that you did want to look at some alternatives, wanted to look at maybe providing service outside the urban service area in a few more situations than are allowed by the current exceptions. So what staff did in the staff report, and it's all outlined in the staff report, is we identified 3 options for you. The first option is taking no action, leaving current policies, current regulations the way they are. The second policy is allowing anyone, anywhere to connect to public water if a person wants to. And the third policy is to structure a little more narrow exception that's pretty closely related to the current exception for a connection allowance for properties that are contiguous to the urban service area. What we'd suggest, if you want to go this route, is allow properties that abut an existing water line, and that would be a water line that is existing at that point in time. So if a water line's constructed a year from now, then that would be considered an existing water line. Allow any properties abutting a line like that to connect, and that would essentially be comparable to the allowance for connection of properties that are outside but contiguous to the urban service area boundary, and it really would follow the same logic there. When we evaluated these, the staff's position is the no action alternative is the cleanest, the easiest to deal with. The connect anyone, anywhere, any property, anytime is really pretty problematic. Really, utilities then would have no indication of who would be served when. They couldn't forecast demand as well. It would bring up situations that I indicated here where It's more costly for utilities to maintain the system out there because if they have fire flow sized water mains out there and they have low demand and water's just sitting there, they have to flush the system more often, and it's more costly. And besides that, from a growth management perspective, if we're extending utilities all over the place with no rhyme or reason, it really reduces the relationship between amending the comp plan, expanding the urban service area, allowing higher density or outside the urban service area. So staff does not think that option 2 is a good one. The third option, as I said, is a narrower option. It relates to allowing connection where there's an existing water line. And as I said, that's really just an extension of the current exception that we have for allowance of connection of properties that are contiguous to but outside the urban service area. And there are probably other options which are variations of those three and that the board could consider. I do want to make the point, I think it's important, whatever option you choose, that it be noted up front that any property connecting to the water system should pay the full entire cost of connection to the system.
Yeah, makes sense.
With that, I will leave you with our recommendation that the best option from our perspective is no action. The second best would be option 3, and we think option 2 would be problematic.
Mr. Chairman?
Thank you.
Commissioner Solari, if I may?
Yes, Mr.
I think my questions are probably for Vinny, though. But I'll ask Bob one, a definitional question. Abutting, does that include across the street?
Yes, it does.
Okay, I just want to make sure. Sometimes Vinny, there's evidently the problem of looping or non-looping, the one-way line extensions. How far, because the second part of this is abutting or within specified distance, and that's what I want to try to figure out, what would be a specified distance, a distance where the line could extend without causing water quality problems?
I don't know if we have a certain distance, but when you do oversize the line, you want to try to limit a unidirectional flow for 2 reasons. 1, the chlorine that dissipates over time, and 2, the bacteriological requirements that we're supposed to maintain for the DEP. So if you can limit the unidirectional one-way running of that line, you're then going to reduce that much more volume in that line.
That's what
so
I'm
I don't have a
trying to
certain,
get. What is
certain line length at this point. It could be a 10-inch, it could be 8-inch. It just depends on the volume of water within that pipe and how long you want to extend it outside of a certain designated area.
But if we're going to go with option 3, it seems like we either use abutting or today specify a distance, right? I'm trying to, and I just want to try to figure out if we were to specify a distance, what that distance would be without impacting the water quality.
I understand.
Commissioner, if I, as I understand it, the distance isn't as much of the factor as it is the usage. For example, if you have a bunch of people using it down in a distance, you wouldn't have to flush as regularly. If you've got...
I understand, but in here, we're not going to have much usage. I mean, I'm thinking about this area. These areas are basically 5 and 10 acre tracts. The line, one of the problems is that when you extend a line here, you can go 500 feet and get one person, another 500 feet and get another, whereas in an urban area, you may have 20 or 30. And I think, as my understanding is, that that's what generates the problem. So I'm just trying to get some idea of if it's possible to get...
I think I can answer your question. We have a similar situation over on 33rd Street where we have, through the exemption that Mr. Keating had mentioned, a certain distance off of the line that's going to run east to west off of 33rd to where we have that exemption to where we can allow certain users to connect. We're doing that for twofold. One, for fire flow for some of the residents in the area, and there's also a Florida residential, I believe, that's in that area as well. But we're also looping the system within Trillium. So in that case, we're actually getting a looped connection within our system to provide better water quality, but we are extending it along the urban service boundary, I believe 1,700 feet. So in that case, you're going to have a larger sized line, but you're only going to have fewer connections, as Commissioner Davis had mentioned. So there could be a situation down the road where if there's not a lot of usage, say 2,000 to 3,000 gallons per day per customer, you're going to have quite a volume of water with that chlorine that that dissipates, that we're still able to, we have to require a certain chlorine residual within that line. So we're going to have to periodically go out there, and if there's not a lot of usage, turn that water over.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm trying to get to see if there is a distance which we could state without giving you additional operational problems.
You know, in order to get...
or a way to word it.
Probably the best way to do that is require a loop versus... I mean, because exactly...
Okay, but we're also going to have the part of the owner paying for the line.
Sure.
Okay, I mean, if we have a loop, if the board wants to require the loop and require the property owner to pay the line, I'm happy with that.
See, if I could, I've kind of got two different groups here, and I'm going to go ahead and name names, so y'all forgive me. I've got the Limbos, and then I've got the Banaks. And I'm sitting here looking at the Banaks property here, and they're adjacent to the urban service boundary, it looks like, so they would fit into that, but the urban service boundary is across the main relief canal, and so clearly their water probably wouldn't come from the state college or along any kind of a lateral that may be there. They're outside the urban service boundary, but under our current, they're currently eligible to connect, in my opinion, because they are adjacent. It meets that. But that, if we use that policy to get the water from that location, then it would create a stub that would create water problems like Vinny's talking about. What makes sense there is for them to get their water from 58th Avenue to where we recently installed on 66th Avenue. What would that do? That created a loop. Therefore, we don't have to worry about that as far as that situation. And again, that's not going to be cheap to do, but they're here today because they're very interested in this, and we've talked about it for quite a while. But I bang my head up against the wall whenever our policy states X, Y, and Z. You can. Then they said, well, y'all see where I'm going with this. Right. Then the newly created problem that we have is we've got people on 66th Avenue that are looking at a pipe that our policy says they can't tap into. I can't defend that. So, to me, it's not about expanding urban services or the urban service boundary. To me, it's about if people want water, let them have it. And I know everybody can view that differently, but
and I'm with you there. I just want to make sure that when we set a policy here for future areas,
there's always going to be a line somewhere that somebody's going to want it pushed a little bit more.
But I just just trying to make it as reasonable as possible, but not impact negatively the operations of the.
And another main thing here that really has brought, I think, will continue to bring people forward is the savings on insurance because you're within 1,000 feet of a fire hydrant. And
well, that one doesn't bother me as much. People chose to live outside the urban service area, so that one doesn't bother me as much as somehow making a mistake, which is just turned up and they have bad water near good water. I mean,
beauty's in the eye of the beholder, and so what I call bad water.
No. I mean, I'd like to get water to as many people as we could in a reasonable fashion. So I've got no problem with that.
But it defies sense if the citizens can look at that blue-green pipe and they can't tap into it, and they watch it go in the ground right before their property, and they have no access merely because they're on the other side of the urban service line. And I don't think anybody here is purporting to move the urban service line in any way, shape, or form. And Joe, it's okay. Nobody's thinking that way. Again, with the cost factors, but it does defy sense that somebody can reach over and touch the source of the water and not be able to drink it. So. With that, gentlemen, any further discussion?
I have a few questions. I think one thing we have to look at in the big picture, and the 66th Avenue Road project is, if you looked at its total project value from Oslo Road to 510 is excess of $100 million probably, right? Somewhere in that ballpark. Is it, when we're planning incredibly expensive roadway systems, you should have a utility thought component with it, because you don't want to put in this great new road and then go, gee, now we got to saw cut and add a pipe here or a pipe there down the road. Is when we're proposing a new road, it should track a utility component. And you can say, okay, if you're passing past some RM3 or some RM6, you can go, we might have X number of potential users. You can size your pipe accordingly. Put it this way, if you're buying 10-inch pipe or 12-inch pipe or 14-inch pipe, once you get above 10 and beyond, the cost is greater, but the trench to put it in, the valves are similar. It's just the difference of the diameter of the pipe. You could always default and say, well, unknown, we'll put in, a 2-inch bonus diameter size on the pipe to cover, sort of the what if. So I think we have to look at, when we're looking at a long-term road plan, that you should have a utility component to it. On the cost side, in the residents that I spoke with, they're fine for paying their fair share, but if you throw in the loop balance cost, which benefits the system and the other property owners that are going to run by, when you look at 16th Street north of, once you get north past the Grice property and goes across the canal, you then have some fairly large acreage pieces that will likely be developed when the road goes through, or something's going to happen to those. They're going to have a benefit or a cost-sharing opportunity to, if they want to connect, they can pay for, their portion of the line. But I don't want to see, I think the cost of the line as it passes the front of their property, there should be some cost-sharing agreement. And when you get into these large acres, if somebody has a 20-acre site for their house and somebody has a 2-acre site, if you apply the square footage formula, the guy with the 20-acre site with one house on it, and he's never going to put more on it, is going to pay a hugely disproportionate share. So I think you have to look at either the frontage or some other, you have to find out what's the best appropriate method to cost share the system. When Bob had talked about the health department, they test for water that will basically kill you, but if it destroys your clothes, destroys your silverware, makes the inside of your dishwasher turn white and crusty, and you put a glass of it on the table untreated, you'd never drink it. It doesn't address those, because you could, and I grew up drinking artesian water, and you're out in the groves playing around, and you just thought it was fun. I don't particularly probably care to drink that today. But you do a lot of, it was different back then. There wasn't a utility system. Bureau was the only one that had water. So I think we need a better definition on cost, because if you say the full cost and you include the line balancing cost of the portion north of, I think it's around the 1100 block of 66 where it currently stops. If they shared the cost to go to the end of the last user, but not the cost to go over the bridge to balance the line to go across the other acreage property owners that will benefit from the water, I don't think you can put the cost of that portion of the line on the other residents that front a different area.
Well, can I say something? I think that in this case it benefited the whole system. I think the test should be, if you're going to say it's got to be looped, we wouldn't have to loop it unless we had done that line to them.
Right.
Then it benefits only them, so the cost should be included. In this last one, it benefited the whole system, so I don't think it should.
Okay.
If you say, okay, if we run to them and then we have to loop it, then they should pay, and we did it just to benefit them.
Right.
Now, in this particular case last week, it benefited the whole system, so I don't think the looping should be included in their cost.
Okay. Now, so in the definition of cost, I think some language of what Joe just said needs to be added to it. So when it's a system benefit, that cost that is the benefit to the system and the overall water network shouldn't be part of the full cost when you're looking at how much you're going to go back to the property owners on. So a few things we could work on looking at when we establish our roadway long-term plans, to look at how do we track a reasonable utility component. Does it make sense to put in dry lines, wet lines, so that you're prepared for the future at a lower cost basis going forward.
And not to speak for Chris Moore's group, but they do that. They add in utility shells. They do plan. They do interact with utilities for that. Before I got here, my predecessor, Mr. Olson, was involved with actually trying to size a 20-inch diameter line to run parallel to 58th, but due to the cost involved with that project, for whatever reason, there was a decision made not to do that line. So there was consideration to try to run a parallel line to benefit the users of the system and increase redundancy.
And also chases for future fiber optics or whatever, kind of the what if. I know we do a lot of that currently for the signalization network, but just to look at it, because it's a lot cheaper to put it in when the ground's dug up and the trench is open and the machinery's there than to come back and everything's finished and you need to add something later.
Thank you. Gentlemen, anything else? Well, I think at this point, do we have a motion?
I might have some people want to talk.
I'd just like to, one other thing if I could. Again, on the abutting or the distance, I mean, are we going to have any specified distance that would go? I don't think we can leave it open-ended. Somebody's 5 miles out, we're going to consider piping 5 miles out. I mean, I think we're all along the area of option 3. And are we going to leave it at abutting or use some other language there? That's what I'm unclear at this time.
And Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, I think on the, it all, like Vinnie had mentioned, that when you look at who's the last user of the line, what's their consumption, how does the water move through the line, depending on what users you have on the line determines how far you can go. So you could make some assumptions, but one of those might land us back here 6 months from now of an assumption that we didn't think of. But you could probably, and I'm just throwing a number out, a half a mile or some number to where you're addressing Bob's scenario. You don't want to put a one-way line 5 miles out in one direction with a single tap user at the end, because you'll be out flushing that line. Your maintenance cost will be huge, and probably wouldn't. I don't know if DEP might not even let you do that, but there may be a way to come up with a number that's kind of greater than what really addresses this situation, so that it doesn't mean we have to come back and address something else in the future. But I don't know if you did 2,500 feet, is that enough distance to kind of address?
Yeah, we'll look at those and come back to the board with a recommendation on that distance. If you need something right here, you could probably say up to a half mile off an existing loop system to be able to provide X number of connections for the users within that area.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to go ahead with a motion which would include all abutting landowners, but ask for a specific recommendation from the utility department when they have a time to work through some scenarios. So if that's good enough for today, I'll make that in the form of
all adjoining.
Abutting. I'll use the word for abutting, with the idea that the utilities department is going to come back in the near future with a modification to what we're doing, which will specify a distance.
Second.
Just to tell you procedurally, I think I failed to mention this is a comprehensive plan amendment, a text amendment, and this is a window month that it can be submitted. But it takes generally about 4 months or so for this to go through, because this is a standard amendment. It's got 3 public hearings. It's got to go to the state for review. So what you'd be doing today is directing staff to initiate the process of amending the comp plan.
What are we looking at as far as that procedure? I see a lot of the applicants, a lot of the citizens that may be partaking in this process are here present today. Are we looking at perhaps maybe January?
Yeah, that would probably be the final.
Is that
approval.
A safe estimate of anticipation of approval, having?
Okay, may I ask one more question? So, Bob, would that mean we'd have to start this whole process over if we changed it to 2,500 feet?
No, we can be flexible with that going forward.
Thank you.
We do have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Solari, seconded by myself. Counsel?
To the chair, I actually heard 2 separate things. First off, Commissioner Solari referenced the abutting and asking staff to analyze the distance issue, but I had also heard from the board an issue concerning the individual or a person paying their share based upon the individual benefit or the system benefit, and I didn't know if you wanted that incorporated as part of the amendment or as the request.
I think based on the discussion, that was an presumption.
Yes, I'll clarify that. So the property owner who requests the extension pays for the extension.
And second, so amended for clarification purposes. Is anybody that wishes to come forward? It most certainly sounds like option 3 is fast approaching.
And it does sound like that the paperwork process of the approval would be finished before the road's finished and the final DEP sign-off on the lines, or, they're not too far apart based on all the work that's been done on the road so far. And also, should when the change order is done to the engineer that did the current water line extension to 11th Street, when they design that, should they look at the estimated number of taps along the way, so that they're building it, when they're building the line, they're building it with this guy's likely to connect, this guy's likely, and that way it's just less time, less work you have to go back and redo later.
Yep, we're doing that.
Thank you, Commissioner. Well, seeing no one coming forward, let's be ready to call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you all. Next item on the agenda is from the Office of Management Budget. It's the Recreational Revenue Refunding Bond, Series 2003, consideration for early payoff and interfund loan from General Fund, memorandum dated July 9, 2013, found on pages 173 through 176. Good morning, Mr. Brown and Mr. Zito.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Jason Brown, County Budget Director. I have with me Michael Zito, Assistant County Administrator. Today, what we have before you for your consideration is the potential early payoff of the recreational revenue bonds of 2003. Those are bonds that were issued to refinance the initial bonds used to construct the county golf course, Sandridge. What we're proposing today, those bonds will be fully paid off in 2016, so we've got about 3 years remaining on there. However, what we're proposing to do today is pay those bonds off early, use an interfund loan from the general fund on the remaining about $1.6 million to provide an interest savings for the golf course. Those bonds carry about a 4% interest rate, the remaining ones outstanding. What we're proposing is a 2.5% interest rate charged by the general fund. That will do two things. That will save about $45,000 over the remaining 3 years in interest for the golf course. It will also provide an increased interest earnings for the general fund because we're currently receiving about a 0.5% interest on our investments in the general fund. Most of those funds are invested in very conservatively in U.S. Treasuries and agencies of the federal government, so that's earning about a 0.5%. What we've done for the analysis is assumed a slight increase in interest rates up to 1% over the remaining 3 years. So what we would do there is the general fund would gain about $44,000 in interest earnings over that time over the existing investment portfolio. And I want to emphasize that our golf course fully funds and pays for itself with user fees. We've not had a subsidy from the general fund, so no tax dollars go towards this, and that's the same here today. If you'll recall, we had a similar proposal to pay off the spring training bonds. That was a payoff. What this is the payoff of the bonds. However, the golf course is going to repay the general fund. So this would not be any kind of subsidy from the general fund because the general fund is going to get paid back, and there's actually going to be a slight financial benefit to the general fund from the interest earnings. So with that being said, I'll open up to any questions you may have.
Gentlemen?
Mr. Chairman. So, Jason, this money will come out of the general fund reserve?
Yes.
So if we were to make this payment of about $1.5 million from the general fund reserve, if, just hypothetically, someone wanted to avoid a millage rate in the general fund, say, tomorrow, would there still be money in the general fund left to do that without impacting the reserves really negatively?
This would leave funds available for that. We have various things that we may want to discuss on that in further detail tomorrow or maybe today, but it wouldn't jeopardize that decision.
It wouldn't jeopardize that.
Well, let me say that let's say this, that any time you're getting into your fund balance, you're starting to hurt yourself. Second thing is that it depends on the magnitude of it. The sky isn't the limit. And we have to look forward. So this is obviously something we're very concerned with, but when we talk about getting the reserve this is a loan and will be paid back, but when if you're getting into our reserves and we're using our reserves for ongoing expenses rather than one time, that's a dangerous slope. And I'm a little concerned about that. I think if we use that to balance our budget all the time rather than look at controlling our expenses, that's a bad road to go down.
I'll agree with all of that. I just didn't want us to do something today which would preclude us from doing something which we might discuss about tomorrow without bringing it out.
This wouldn't.
Because there just is some slight possibility that given that millage rate is for the general fund now. I'm just talking the general fund, not the emergency services, but that general fund increase in millage that the staff recommends is small. I mean, I would say so. I mean, I just think that there may be discussion about that tomorrow, and I would hate to shut the door on that discussion by a vote today. That's all.
No, this wouldn't, because this is a loan and will be paid back, and we're fortunate to have been planned financially prudently in the past,
absolutely,
so that we can do this.
Mr. Barrett.
And Joe, we have tapped into the fund on several occasions for emergency services. Is that correct? For needed services for Indian River County?
Yeah, one of the things is, and why we did that was our fund balance in emergency services got high, and there was a lot of attention brought to the fact that it was extremely high. And so we reduced it, we began reducing it. But now we're going to have the pain of pulling out of those substantial reductions. And at some time you have to make that hard decision. That's what we're going to be making tomorrow.
I appreciate your concern for having that concern for having too much in the coffers. That's an unusual statement.
Well, no, I never think we have too much in the coffers. I think it's we should keep adequate savings and look out for our community.
Well, you and Jason are here, and as far as looking forward to tomorrow's discussion, could you give us an account of what is in that fund balance now in the general fund?
Total general fund balance is about $50 million. We do have policies requiring us to maintain a fund balance of 20% of the general fund budget. That would be a little over $20 million. We also have a 5% emergency stabilization reserve, or a disaster emergency reserve, and a 5% budget stabilization reserve. So those amounts are significant. And our concern, I think, like Joe says, is it's against our policy to use the fund balance for a recurring expense. We have made an exception to that over the last few years in an effort, I think in extraordinary times, to keep the burden off of the taxpayer when we had cut as far as we think we could cut, and use those for a limited time. And our concern is going forward we need to move away from that. And I think we're seeing tomorrow why Joe and I are generally against using our fund balance, because it's easy to start it, it's very hard to end it, and you put yourself on in a dangerous path potentially.
But Mr. Chairman, I'll just note that when Jason didn't mention that the sort of subtraction is that for the general fund there's about $24 million of what could be described as excessive fund balance, while in the EMS reserve it's about $1.3 million. So again, the financial situation of the general fund is substantially different from the financial situation of the emergency services. I just want to bring that portion of it out.
I would agree. It's definitely more urgent in the emergency services district.
Thank you.
But based on your information that you presented today, that we're basically, by policy, to hang on to about $25 million plus or minus a few?
About $30 million.
About $30 million?
Yeah.
Okay. And you did confirm that we're $50 million plus in reserve?
No, when our policy is unrestricted reserve. That's
right.
The difference. So it's pretty close to where we would normally be. I will say that we've cut our budgets in the general fund, which you'll see tomorrow, substantially, and we were asking everyone to follow. We cut our budgets 5.5% in the general fund in our departments again. And we're becoming such a small part of our own general fund budget because we cut and the others don't. That's causing huge problems.
I wish that all the constitutionals could do that, but there are some areas in the constitutional offices that may not be afforded that luxury and privilege to be able to adjust to a bare bones necessity value without being able to continue to provide the level of service that's expected by the citizens.
Mr. Chairman, I did just wanted to bring out
let's go ahead.
That clarification on that.
Thank you. I think we're going to have a lengthy debate tomorrow, and I'm anxious to see this tomorrow.
As am I. But for today's business, I'm happy to move staff recommendation.
Second. That's a motion by Commissioner Solari, seconded by myself. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. At this time, gentlemen, we'll take a 10-minute recess.
Mr. Horner, please. Wesley Davis. I'm doing well. How you doing, Becky? Good. I called. Yeah, Jack stopped by my house yesterday regarding my message, and I told him I was going to give them his phone number. Did I give you all his phone number yet? Yes, he does. He does. Now, I have not had any luck with Betty at this point, but I'm working on that. I called my aunt.
Leslie's got his like blue thing back in his phone, so it's always.
A little short staff. Technology.
We got the dynamic trio down there. We're sure to go to sleep up here.
Meeting will now be called back to order, and the next item is approval of construction of the PC South Aggle nutrient removal facility and approval of the construction of the associated stormwater and brine concentrate force mains. Memorandum dated July 8, 2013, found on pages 177 through 214. Mr. Morrow, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. My name is Chris Morrow, Public Works Director for the county. Today I have with me Keith McCulley, our county stormwater engineer, and Vincent Burke, our Director of Utilities. The reason that we're all up here today is this has been a joint project between Public Works and Utilities. It's pretty much what you see in front of you beginning on page 177 of your backup is a culmination of about over a year of design and engineering and bidding to bring this PC South project all together today. We've broken it up into 5 hopefully easily digestible parts. They're lettered A through E beginning on 177. And what we want to do is go briefly through each of these 5 parts and show you how this all comes together as a project and what it will mean. To briefly describe PC South, it's a project that combines some of the aspects of Egret Marsh, which is an existing county stormwater park that we have that cleans the water before it gets to the Indian River Lagoon. And it also combines some aspects of Spoonbill Marsh, which is a similar type project, although it doesn't use the same process. PC South, or Pollution Control South Relief Canal, which is what PC South is short for, will use the same type of algal turf scrubber system that is, although on a smaller scale, that is currently being operated by the county in the Egret Marsh facility. And then, like Spoonbill Marsh, it will also be used to clean the brine discharge from the South County water plant. Spoonbill Marsh uses a process to clean the briny discharge from the North County water plant. We'll now be doing that on a similar scale in the South County. This project is needed, number one, because we don't have a project on the South Relief Canal to clean that water, and number two, because Utilities Department is under a consent order from the state to clean up that briny discharge that comes out of the South County water plant as an effluent for from the byproduct, really, of the reverse osmosis process that they use to create drinking water. The 5 parts that we're going to go through, A through E. The first one, A, is for the board to award a contract to build the PC South facility, which is going to be located just north of the existing South County water plant, which is on Oslo Road, just east of 20th Avenue. In addition to that, as part of that construction contract, the contractor will also be building the pumping station that will pump water from the South Relief Canal. The pumping station will be at 27th Avenue, and then they'll pump that water with that new pumping station to the PC South facility, which will be near the water plant. So A is awarding a construction contract to build PC South's facilities, PC South and the pump station. Part B is a separate construction contract that we would like you to approve today that will build the pipelines. There's two main pipelines with this project. Once we build the pump station to take the water out of the South Relief Canal, we've got to pipe it to PC South. So that contract will build that pipeline from 27th Avenue roughly to just east of 20th Avenue where PC South is located. That's pipeline number one. Pipeline number two is to pipe from the water plant a pipeline to carry the brine to PC South. So those two pipelines were bid and done as a separate contract. They're all contained in Part B. Part C is to authorize staff to direct purchase some of the equipment that we're going to use at PC South. When we direct purchase equipment, which is a tactic we often use in these larger, more expensive projects, we save the sales tax. Rather than have our contractor purchase the equipment, have to pay the sales tax, and then we've got to pay him, we would buy it directly and have him install it for us. It's a way to save the county some money. We'll get into that savings a little bit later. That's A, B, and C. D is to create a construction contract contingency fee that we would like you to approve in a certain percentage amount, because with these large contracts we often run into problems along the way that we couldn't foresee during the engineering phase, and we like to have this contingency fee available so that we can move quickly to make these adjustments so that no time is lost. That's A through D. The last one, E, the fifth part, is the approval of a payment to Hydromentia Incorporated. Hydromentia owns the patent on the algal turf scrubber process. Their patent has some wide boundaries. They also have covered under their patent not just the algal turf scrubber system, but also some of the harvesting techniques. We were concerned that the fee was going to be very high. In fact, it was $380,000 that we had to pay Hydromentia to use their patented process, the ATS process for Egret Marsh. We were concerned that that was going to be too high for this project because we're trying to keep costs contained. We did get with Hydromentia. We also visited with a patent attorney that we used through the legal office, and we tried to see if there was any wiggle room as far as this patent and maybe not have to pay this license fee, because some of the technology that we're using we've changed. For example, on the flowway at Egret Marsh, the original flowway that was a membrane failed, and we had to design a new flowway made out of concrete that we designed in-house. That's different from what the original technology was for Egret Marsh. We're going to use this new concrete flowway. It's built into the design for PC South. So we were checking to see if that patent still held water. Did it still apply? And our patent attorney that we talked with and discussed this issue with said that it did. On a more limited basis, but it did. Now, we brought this information to Hydromentia. They agreed to reduce their fee from $380,000 to $190,000, and we'll be recommending in E that we pay that that the county pays that $190,000 patent fee to use the ATS technology at PC South. So roughly that's A through E. I've talked a little bit about what PC South is going to do. It'll act a little bit like Egret Marsh in that it uses an algal turf scrubber and a flowway, and it utilizes the algae to pull nutrients out of the water, the dissolved nitrogen and phosphorus. It will also act like Spoonbill Marsh in treating the brine discharge from the water plant. We go into a little bit more detail on each of A through E, beginning on page 179. I'll talk a little bit about that now. Part A shows the construction contract for PC South, which again includes the PC South facility, the waterworks, and the pump station. We bid that we advertised that for bids in April. We received bids and opened them in June. The low bidder was Close Construction LLC at little over $5.8 million. Staff looked at the costs. We felt that was a reasonable cost. It was actually below the engineer's estimate, which was $6.6 million. We're familiar with Close Construction. They actually did reconstructed the flowway for us at Egret Marsh. They're familiar with the concrete flowway. We worked extensively with them on exactly what kind of finish should be on the flowway to promote the growth of algae. They did very well, and we're confident that they could do this job. So we'll be recommending them for the board's approval for Part A for the PC South construction of the facilities. In B, on page 180, the utilities department bid that as a separate project. That's the two pipelines, the brine pipeline and the stormwater force main. They bid that. We received bids on June 6th. The low bidder for that project was Felix Associates of Florida at $1.16 million. That again came in under the engineer's cost estimate, so we feel that that's a reasonable cost. One thing we do want to point out with the bid from Felix is that originally Felix did not fill out all of the forms that they were required to fill out under the bidding process. They did not fill out a form known as Section 00900, Requirements for Experience and Qualifications for General Contractor and Directional Drill Subcontractor. Felix was proposing to use a subcontractor, Young's Communications, to do the directional drilling, which there's a significant amount of because it's a pipeline job. They did not initially fill that out, which is, it's not a fatal error, but it's an irregularity in their bid. Other contractors who responded to this also did not fill out this form. The county followed up, and our consultant, Kimley Horn, also followed up with Felix and later received the necessary information to verify that experience. So at this point, our consultant, Kimley Horn, and the county is confident that Felix and their subcontractor, Young's Communication, have the experience to do this work. But we did want to make the board aware of this irregularity. You do have the power, the ability, the authority to waive this irregularity. In the contract itself that we bid, it says under Section 1.15 that the owner reserves the right, among other things, to waive any and all informalities not involving price, time, or changes in the work. This does not involve price, time, or changes in the work. It involves qualifications that they later proved that they had. So you have the ability to waive this, and later on when staff asks that you approve Part B, this contract to Felix will ask you to also waive that irregularity in the bidding process. That's A and B. Part C is the direct purchase aspect. As I mentioned, often in these contracts that are very large, we do like to purchase the equipment directly through the county versus the contractor to avoid the sales tax. If we do that on this contract, we'll be saving approximately $75,000 in state sales tax. We would be using this portion to purchase the pumps. These are very high quality, high torque pumps. They're made by Flight. They're commonly used in water plants and utility operations, but we've used them in Egret Marsh. They're very high-quality pumps. We've had very few failures with them, and so we'd like to purchase them directly to save the sales tax. And that is Part C that we'll be asking you to approve in just a minute. Part D is the construction contingency fee. I've explained that. It's basically to keep an amount equal to approximately 5% of the Felix and close construction bid amounts so that we can react quickly and make adjustments to the construction contract should things come up that we didn't foresee during the design and engineering phases. Excuse me. The last portion, E, is the license fee again. That's $190,000. We did not, at the time that we brought this, we're putting together this agenda item, we knew the amount. We've agreed informally to this amount, but we don't have the contract with Hydromentia ready at this time. The legal department is still working with Hydromentia and our staff to make that happen, but we know what the amount is going to be. We wanted to put it in here to show you that it's part of the $10+ million budget for this project, and we wanted to make you aware of it. The remaining items basically just go through the construction costs, and there's the various attachments associated with the bids. What staff is asking for you to do today is to approve parts A through E, the award of the contract on PC South, the award of the contract on the two pipelines, that's A and B, to direct staff to direct purchase the pump equipment, the facilities that are going to save us the sales tax money, that's C, and then to create the construction contingency fee reserve, which is D, and E, finally, to approve in concept the $190,000 license fee to Hydromentia. So we're asking for your approval on A through E, and we're available for any questions.
Gentlemen. Commissioner Solari.
The first one, the PC South, by the time it's finished, I hope you get a better name.
Hey, I was going to say for $10 million, we ought to call it something spectacular.
I mean, Egret Marsh, Spoonville Marsh, I think these are good names.
Osprey, Golden Eagle.
I'll
call it the Manatee, Savin, Nursing, Gopher, Tortoises.
I believe that, Chris. It sounds like an engineer's name. Good. We'll try to work on that.
Osprey South.
Can I suggest we take it out of the engineer's hands if you want creativity?
I'm fine with that. I'll let you determine who it goes to, Mr. Barrett. The importance of measurements. How will the nitrogen and phosphorus removal be measured on an ongoing basis?
Well, at Egret Marsh, what we did was water quality tests, influent and effluent, and then also we had algae samples taken and analyzed by a laboratory, and they gave us the results of the nitrogen and phosphorus contained in the algae tissue. And so what we do at Egret Marsh to estimate the removal is we have a skid steer loader we use to collect the algae once we take it off the ATS flowway, and then we count the number of skid steer buckets, and we know on an average basis how much each bucket weighs, and we back in to the lab analysis and get a pounds removed per bucket load, basically, of nitrogen and phosphorus. And I would think we could do the same thing with PC South here.
Okay. I would just you do something. If the same thing is fine, but I just want to make sure that there are the measurements.
Yeah.
The second one is the total measurements of nitrogen you have down here is 9,830 pounds, which is higher than our experience shows we're getting from Egret Marsh. And at Egret Marsh we have the finishing ponds, which we don't have here. So I was wondering where that number came from.
Right. These were based, and I understand where you're coming from, because actually the PC South site is only about a third the size of Egret Marsh. So one would think intuitively that it's going to remove 1/3 the amount of dissolved nutrients, or on a lesser scale.
Well, lesser, but I wouldn't say 1/3.
Right. Now, one thing we did here in making these estimates is we had a pilot study done using the South Relief Canal water, and that pilot study on a much smaller scale recreated this process where we were mixing the canal water and the brine discharge. And what we found was it created because the brine already has a lot of nitrogen and phosphorus dissolved in it, it created a stable feed supply basically to the site that we don't have at Egret Marsh. Egret Marsh, the dissolved nutrient levels vary widely depending on the type of water and flow amounts that we're getting from Indian River Farms out of the lateral D canal. In the pilot study, it was a steady flow, and because the brine water has a lot of dissolved nutrients in it, we were able to measure the amount using the 10-to-1 mix at a very high level. And so we extrapolated that number upward based on how much flow we assumed we would have with the PC South site once it's in place. And it turned out that the numbers were very high because we extrapolated them upward. Now, we don't know for a fact that we're going to get these numbers, but the only way we had to be able to put the brine into the mix was to measure during the pilot study and then extrapolate the numbers upward. So it's a long answer, but
but it gives me something at least, because it just seems on the high side, and more the better, but it just...
It is, yes.
And I'll just note that the numbers we have for the other projects which the county have used, are higher than the DEP BMAP numbers in their draft. So we need to do as much as we can to quantify and note our numbers, because we're evidently not getting the credit that we think we should be getting with DEP yet. So going forward, I think that's going to be more important.
Exactly, and that's why your previous point about the measurements is so important. We have to do that regularly.
And my last thing is, I'm just going to note that the capital cost of this falls into $1,111 per staff's estimate on the nitrogen removed, which falls into basically the same category as the other county projects that we've done. And that's just one of those, the reasons for having an HP calculator on hand to do that. So thank you very much, gentlemen.
Mr. Chairman, I have a few questions. On the 24-inch diameter draft pipe that's going to take the water from the canal and move it to the system, what's the daily estimated flow that we can draft and run through the system on kind of an ongoing basis? Has that gallon's been quantified? And I know it probably depends somewhat on if we have a heavy rainfall that distorts things and some other things, but is there a targeted number?
Yeah, it's the whole system's designed for 10 million gallons per day flow from the canal, mixed with up to 1.5 million gallons per day of brine concentrate.
And what's the water volume of kind of the scrubber area? What is that? Obviously, it'd have to be.
Well, it's like a giant football field, and it's about 4.6 acres, 4.7 acres total, something like that.
So if you did the water volume of that would be...
Oh, you mean that it's actually holding?
Yeah, yes.
I don't have that number, but it's only about an inch deep. It flows on a real thin sheet over the surface.
I didn't know what the flow rate needs to be to have the capture rate to harvest the
that was the purpose of the pilot study.
Right.
And from the pilot study, we determined how long and wide the scrubber needed to be.
Okay. And secondly, does the brine water that goes through the same system, the byproducts that are measured in the algae content are segmented so you can kind of point to, for a pound of algae that was grown, it's 20% this or 30% this or some combination of numbers, or how do you break that out to kind of go along with Commissioner Solari's, so we can always quantify what we're achieving? And then how do we water quality test the water that's leaving the system and going back into the canal? What's our monitoring
We have specific
requirement?
requirements in our existing DMR now where we currently discharge for total nitrogen and phosphorus coming out of the existing line, which is roughly about half of what this is for. So from a volumetric standpoint, at least initially we'd be operating at, say, 5 million gallons a day with about 750,000 gallons of brine. So we are going to be taking, once this goes into effect, our DMRs, our discharge monitoring reports, grows from about 2 pages to about 4.5 pages. We have to take a slew of tests, not only upstream, but at the mixing point at the headworks to determine the concentration of the brine coming in, and then at the final polishing ponds before it then enters into the sublateral canal, so that we can then quantify at least hydraulically some of the issues that are taken out for at least the total nitrogen, phosphorus, and there's some other constituents that are in the brine as well.
Does the company that has the patent on the system, are we kind of using their measuring model? I'm trying to. If you're creating a new way of testing and measuring, then the agency directives or the agency people are a little more. I don't want to use the word skeptical, but if it's published in a book, like an ITE manual, you can point to that for traffic all day long, and everybody accepts it. In this type of measuring science and technology, is it proven enough to where you could go to DEP? Well, look, this is what we're using. Here's the backup. Are we still kind of on the cutting edge part where we're kind of proving what we're doing, and it's just not quite been around long enough to get the credibility that it's due?
I believe with the Eager Marsh system, what we did after that was completed, we had a 1-year period for the 319 grant water quality study, and we hired Alan Stewart of Hydromentia to basically write the report. And the report, he looked at it from a water quality in and out standpoint, and plus the laboratory analysis of the harvested algae and the weights and stuff. And he developed a spreadsheet based on that data, and the weight, estimating it by algae weight collected, matches very closely with the water quality in and out. And I think that's the spreadsheet we use when we estimate the removals at Egret Marsh, and I think we could easily defend that in front of DEP if the issue ever came up.
You would think that the patent holder on the process would appreciate more documented proof that the patented process is working, whether it's in the form of white papers or other things that are out there. I know in going through other committees on beaches and shores, when we go to score our technology advancement on using upland sand, the state gives us a goose egg because they go, well, it's not really new, other than it was the largest project ever done in the state and all the other things that go with it. We don't get any credibility for the technology that we came up with to make that type of process happen. And I just want to make sure with this, as we do these, we get the credit that's due by the agency people through education and white papers and other things to move it forward. Last question on the patent cost. When we probably had to tell them that the original system failed, that they charged us, what was it, $380 on that first time we used their patent?
We did, and that's been part of the negotiations with them in reducing their fee, because we didn't. We agreed, and I believe it was Alan Palakowicz who made it part of the negotiations that if we agreed not to go after them for the failed flowway at Egret Marsh, that could also be a reason to reduce their fee on this facility.
Right. And we don't have the ability probably to sell them the new technology that we created that kind of fixed their process. And when they promote their system, are they now promoting it with way we're building this one, or do they still promote it using the portion that failed?
Well, they were, and Keith can probably answer this better, but I think they were pushing that original membrane design for PC South even while we were under design with the concrete flowway, from what I recall. Keith may.
Yeah, they don't like to try new things in fear of failure, and we saw the failure with the other system.
The other one already failed, so you've got to do something to get more life out of it.
But that's how we ended up with the concrete. We won't build another one with the membrane.
Okay. All right, that's all that I have.
That's it, Commissioner. Thank you. Anything further?
Mr. Chairman, if there's nothing further, I'll go ahead and with the motion.
Second.
And I'll move that we go with item 1, item 2, Felix. And with Felix, I'll note that there are irregularities, but the irregularities were not material. With the direct purchase, with the construction of contingency fee reserve, and with hydromentia license fee. So the motion includes all 5 items.
Thank you for your thoroughness.
I'll second that. My question, is there a point at which the patent on this technology will expire?
Yes, it actually, all of the patents that relate to the harvesting and the nutrient transfer process expire in 2015. That was an option that they threw out there, but obviously we can't wait that long to build PC South.
Right.
So we discussed that, but yeah, they do expire in 2015.
So I'm just making sure.
And the motion includes the new name?
Which one was that?
Well, I mean, they have to come up with one. I'm not.
I think in honor of the scrub jay habitat we had to work around, you might be able to somehow tie that into...
I heard staff recommendation was Wesley Davis Park. That's what I heard.
As I said, Wesley, we're not going with staff recommendation today.
We were hoping for some creativity.
That was creative, though, Commissioner.
Just also in the interest of full disclosure, we have an existing consent order, as you know, that's attached to our existing South County RO system. That consent order is currently set to expire at the end of 2013. We've already placed a call to the central office, even though right now we technically report down to the Southeast District. The central office was instrumental in working with the Utilities Department to bring this project to fruition. So we've already put them on notice. We've sent them a request in writing to try to extend that consent order additional year, and we will provide them an update on the construction schedule once we have the notice to proceed.
Okay. Has the new DEP jurisdictional people kind of embraced, are they on board? Or I know we've had a lot of years of history with the old group, and now we have kind of like all new bodies at the table. Are they exciting, enthusiastic?
Yeah, we're finding that we're working well with that group. There's obviously a get-to-know meet and greet that has to go on, but we've been successful in working with that group and with our consultants to achieve a couple permits. We're currently in the process as well as renewing 2 of our wastewater permits that will be coming up in a couple months' time as well.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. If nothing further, we have on motion by Commissioner Solari, seconded by Commissioner Davis. No further discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, gentlemen. The next item on the agenda is the renewal for the RFP bid for the water tank maintenance program, RFP number 2007057, memorandum dated July 10, 2013, found on pages 215 through 217.
New staff recommendation.
Second.
That's a motion by Commissioner O'Brien, seconded by Commissioner Solari. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next item on the agenda is the Oyster Reef Pilot Project for Nutrient Removal and Habitat Restoration, memorandum dated July 10, 2013, found on pages 218 through 225.
Mr. Chairman, I'll go ahead and move staff recommendation, and thank you to Vinny and everybody involved in getting this thing moving forward quickly. And then just one, when this came up last week, I had some questions about documenting if the nitrogen and phosphorus are permanently removed. Subsequent that, I've been able to receive some publications that deal with the use of oysters, and it seems pretty clear that they are a permanent sink for the nitrogen and phosphorus. So I don't want them to waste too much time on that now, because it looks like it's pretty well documented. But we might want to have a little backup just when we go to apply for more grants to fully establish that. But I think the literature looks pretty clear that it is a permanent sink. So
oysters were every bit of what they said they were.
Apparently so.
And
even on a cracker.
Yeah. Little Tabasco.
So, kind of if I understand what you're saying, is the byproduct residual of the oyster filtration process, that leftover portion is, how is it addressed again on the, and that's a 1-inch thick report, so maybe if there's a...
Yeah, there's multiple publications here. I'll be glad to share them with you. The phosphorus seems to be really locked up pretty permanently. The nitrogen goes through the whole nitrification process. There is some, when the nitrogen is converted from the oyster, from phytoplankton into the excrement, and then that is broken down by bacteria in the sediments. Most of that nitrogen then becomes nitrogen gas, N2, which is inert, and it just atmospheres off and it's gone. Some of it is converted back into ammonia, which is NH3, and some of that is recirculated back into the water column system. But the data shows that you look at the massive amount of the phytoplankton that the oysters consume, what little bit of it comes back up as ammonia is relatively small amount. So there is a net reduction in the total nitrogen because of the oyster bed systems.
Okay.
In brief, most is digested, and the remaining particulates, if they're not gasified off, they are then developed into the shell structure and permanently encapsulated.
And then what you
primarily the phosphorus is
encapsulated. Some of it will be used in photosynthesis, which is C6H12O6, combined with water and carbon dioxide, and producing the glucose molecule, of course, which is the most simple form of sugar.
Now you understand why most of us are science fair judges.
One question following up on that. Does it anywhere say that the rotation cycle of a oyster project for filtration purposes should be cycled every 5 years, 10 years, or is it kind of once it's up and going, you just let it keep doing its thing? You don't need to kind of break it out and do it over again to kind of maximize the efficiency?
Actually, what's going to happen is that there'll be mantling, there'll be break-off after about 3 generations. There'll be enough outgrowth that they begin to fracture off, then develop their own reef, and then new generations will build upon the parts of the shell that are remaining on the substrate.
So you could end up with, you start off with a quarter-acre test site that over a 5-year period might be a quarter acre plus 10% or some.
In theory, outcroppings will take place.
Because it'll go vertical, though, because that's what sets this apart and makes it different. You're actually putting it on a substrate that the oyster can attach to.
Some of that will happen, but they will grow upward as well, as you saw some of the pictures that we saw.
That's good.
I just have one question on the measurement, which I mentioned yesterday. It says Ecotech will estimate the total nitrogen and phosphorus uptake rate per square meter of reef area. Does that include a measurement of the total square meters of growth?
Yes, not only the uptake, but the growth as well.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure, because you need both numbers to
Yeah, and then we're going to take physical samples of which the county will be responsible for the lab analysis, both in the water quality and in the physical specimens as well.
Fine, as long as they get the size of the reef down so we can make that.
And again, if we can use some recognized platform for the data tracking on this that makes it more recognizable by the agencies as, well, we're using a format that's already been used to measure other things, so we're not reinventing the wheel, so we get as much credit down the road for the efforts.
As long as we agree with it.
Well, true, yes, yep. But there's probably different ways to report the process of how the system is progressing, and whichever way is going to give us more bang for a buck for future grant applications, more point scoring. Since we learned the hard way on beaches, we get 0 for some of our great inventions.
My money's on the oysters, and I think we're going to get plenty of bang for a buck.
I think so, and maybe a snack.
Well, I don't know. Let's get the nutrients out first.
Right.
Ms. Renzi, good morning.
Thank you. Good morning. Renee Renzi, Waverly Place, Vero Beach. I'm no engineer, but the last 3 items, the Public Works and Utilities Service, sounds to me as though we have 2 departments that are dealing with the pollution that everybody's worried about in the lagoon. And I think they're positive movements, and I think you should publicize that. Let the public know what you're actually doing rather than wringing your hands and having workshops.
Thank you, Ms. Renzi. And keep in mind, this is the 4th such of these projects. This is just the 4th.
Yeah.
We've got 3 others prior to this that are all sitting there to remove these nutrients out. And your point does not fall on deaf ears for me, especially.
Okay.
I believe that you're exactly right. Is the public does not have enough access to, and I don't have the answer for it yet, but the public doesn't have enough access to these facilities to understand what we're doing.
Unless they're watching this meeting, they don't know about these 3 items.
And I've said that before on a local radio show in the past. I will lay this commission's efforts and record as far as improving water quality in Indian River County that goes into our lagoon against anybody's on the east coast of Florida.
Right. Do you have a PR person?
Commissioner Flesher.
Thank you for that, Commissioner Davis.
Well,
that was
that's
my
what's
former
needed.
occupation. But
Plaster it all over the local paper.
I will say, in respect to your inquiry, most certainly, we appreciate all of the attention that the media has given our environment. You haven't been able to open up a newspaper or listen to the radio without hearing or seeing something about Indian River Lagoon. The attention from the point of the symposium, from what each individual commissioner has stepped forward, saw a plan, saw an idea, a project, and brought it forward. And these projects are moving forward. As a matter of fact, last week I said, wow, I was hoping to get support on that project, but this commission unilaterally wanted to move it forward as quick as possible, and here we are today voting for approval.
Right. Well, most of the newspaper coverage
like
is alarmist, and that's what sells papers. But I think you, as a commission, are publicizing what's happening just today would give the public the idea that people are really grappling with the problem, not just talking about it. And I think that would be a good idea.
Thank you for mentioning that. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Anything further? Counsel, you're leaning in. Did you have a concern?
No concern, except for I remember hearing Commissioner O'Brien move the item, and then I heard a lot of scientific discussion about photosynthesis and ammonia, but I didn't recall hearing a second. Maybe
and I was
someone
the
else
second,
did.
sir.
And I could go back over that, too, if you need me to.
You go
I had to take organic
you go with
twice.
nitrates? Yes. You go with nitrates, phosphorus, and calcium
That
deposits?
is why I never liked chemistry.
I'm fine with all of those things.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next item is the Indian River Aerodrome Subdivision, Indian River County Project number UCP 4100. Approval for the work order number 2 to retain MBV Engineering for surveying services. Memorandum dated July 3rd, 2013, found on pages 226 through 233.
Move staff recommendations.
Second. That's for work order number 2?
That's correct. That's a motion by Commissioner Solari and seconded by Commissioner Davis. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. County Attorney matters, the approval of the expert witness fees for William Bethel, parcel 108, memorandum dated July 9, 2013, found on pages 234 through 237. Counselor.
Good morning, Commissioners. Bill DeBrawl on behalf of the County Attorney's Office. If you recall, Mr. Bethel was a property owner, or still is the property owner, of a parcel of property on 66th Avenue near 49th Street on the west side of 66th Avenue. We had to take about a third of his property for the 66th Avenue project. I challenged the matter both at the order of take and at trial. We proceeded to a 5-day jury trial where the jury came back with a verdict of $305,000 in full and final compensation to Mr. Bethel. Mr. Bethel took an appeal to the 4th District Court of Appeal. The trial was held in May of 2011. We got back a decision affirming the jury's verdict earlier this year. So before us now, the only task that we need to complete to resolve the entire case is the payment of Mr. Bethel's expert witness fees, which we are required to do by statute. Before you, in the backup, you have a table. If you take a look at your screen, you can see one slight correction outlined in yellow. The percentage of the original invoice is noted there. You can see the different experts that were used by Mr. Bethel. 2 appraisers testified at trial, an engineer, a land planner, a general contractor, a horticulturalist. Mr. Bethel testified in his own behalf, or on his own behalf, as to his business damages, while the county used a business damage expert to establish those to establish that there was no business damages as a result of the take. You can see the invoiced amount versus the settlement amount. You can see the settlement amount totals $98,480. plus the county is obligated to pay Mr. Bethel's legal costs, transcripts, things along those natures, along that nature. That is an additional $4,560.34. The total negotiated figure comes out to be $102,960.34. Staff is recommending settlement of the fees, the reduced fees and costs at that matter, or at that figure. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
Mr. Chair. Now, this is for the entire process, or is this just after the verdict and during the appeal?
This is for the entire process. There were no costs awarded as a result of the appeal because he did not win.
Right, but
so these costs stop, or all of the costs stop after trial was completed.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I always have issue with some of these settlements, and it just seems more and more there's invoice creep. Every time we do one of these things, the cost of these expert witnesses keeps going up every single time. I asked Bill, and he provided me with copies of the individual invoices, and in my mind, I don't think that they're treating an eminent domain case like they would any other business deal. And they know because it's eminent domain that they can soak the invoice. Just as an example, just for the appraiser, it took them 16 months from when the start date to where he says he emailed the appraisal. 16 months, 210 total hours of appraisers coming up with a single appraisal. Now, I cannot, at a cost of just for the appraisal work, $33,000. Now, I can't imagine if a bank went to these guys and said, hey, we've got a loan application on this parcel, would you do an appraisal for us? And they would say, yeah, it'll be 16 months and $33,000. There's no way that bank is going to hire them to do that job. And it's just stunning. And if you look at it's the same wordage every day. It's just cut and paste. And 17 times they called some sales. Well, how many times do you got to go through to get that? And then the principal appraiser, he spent 100 hours on this appraisal. Well, then he had to spend another 36 hours reviewing for the deposition. And you think if you'd spent 100 hours doing something, you would kind of remember it. The engineer took 17 months for an engineering report, and I have no idea how much engineering you need to do on something like this. So, I've said it many times. I think we need to draw a line here somewhere, and I would like to make a motion that we table this, and just under consent agenda, we approved a contract with the new eminent domain attorney, and ask him at least to take a look and get his opinion on whether he thinks we could challenge these numbers or not before we just go forward. So that would be my motion. We table this and ask the new eminent domain attorney to take a look at it and give us an opinion.
I'll second that.
The one thing that I'd like to point out is that you're correct that these figures are creeping up because this was a trial. And in the other cases that you have approved the fees, there was no trial involved, so the fees are going to be higher because the experts will have to prepare for the trial and also appear and testify.
Right, and my $33,000 for the appraisal, that was up to when they emailed the appraisal. Mm-hmm. Didn't factor in this other time reviewing for the deposition and for the trial and all that. So that $33,000 was the cost to produce the appraisal. And to me, it's outrageous.
Mr. Chairman.
Please go ahead.
And I appreciate Commissioner O'Brien's consistency on this. He's been very consistent. We don't always agree, and I mean that sincerely.
I know.
And because I think you're right, and I think I'm right. And I just would like for specifically Commissioner Zort, whenever there's going to be more of these come before us, just to understand that this is designed and stacked against the government. Mm-hmm. As it should be. We are taking their property, and then we are negotiating price. then that's really what it boils down to. And this is not a cheap process or inexpensive process at all. And this, my core philosophy on this is if we're taking the property of a private citizen for public benefit, then I would much rather see these dollars go into their pockets versus an Orlando appraiser that takes 16 months to do and a $33,000 price tag. So, and that's been my position whenever these things come before me.
And I believe the last one, we took that approach where we bumped our offer to try to avoid these costs and put more money into the homeowner or the landowner.
Yeah, and it is. And this is one where you just we couldn't get to there from here. And so that was the process. And then I'm going to support your motion to table this because in this instance,
I think it's worth having the other guy take a look at it, is what.
I agree. It's, the action is a little pricey, but and again, Commissioner Davis, most certainly, we are negotiating and we are writing the check after the fact, after we've done our deed. Unfortunately, that parcel of property is needed to continue the roadway, and unfortunately, that landowner never had the intention of selling that property. And with that, I just wanted to ask Council if there is latitude for such a decision based on the statute and the past procedural policy regarding the funding or the payment of these expert witnesses.
Yes, the expert witnesses would have to appear before the court and justify their fees. On the other hand, we would go ahead and retain experts that would testify whether their fee is reasonable or not and offer their opinion. It basically becomes a swearing contest as far as whose opinion carries greater weight.
It's a cottage industry. As soon as the people determine where a road's going, from the Orlando attorneys and South Florida attorneys, they do a mass mailing saying, let our firm, We, Suham and Howe, represent you.
I don't think I'd call it a cottage industry. I'd call it a Rolls-Royce industry.
Yeah, exactly.
A mansion industry.
Right.
Council.
Through the chair, if I may, to Mr. DeBrawl, are you? I know the motion on the floor is that we sort of table this item, or at least defer taking action today and postpone it until the August meeting. Are you aware of any time delays or issues that there are out there pending that would prejudice anyone, or any issues to that effect?
No, there was a hearing scheduled for last week on the matter. It was canceled due to the negotiations and at least our agreement to bring this forward before the board. So there is no pending hearing at this time.
Okay, thank you.
And I take it, if Commissioner O'Brien, would you like this review to be completed for the August 20th meeting?
Yes, I think that would give him a full month to look over the information.
And that would also allow us to be able to tell the other side that there is a deadline in sight.
Okay. And Bill, I'll be glad to give it all back to you so you can...
So the motion is clarified. Is the second clarified?
And yes, and I think whenever this all comes back, if I could, Bill, from my own knowledge, I'd like to find out what this parcel cost us. When I say
as far as total
cost, yes, sir. And because I think it's going to be very interesting for this board to reckon with, is exactly, whenever we start this process, we know it cost us this much.
So how far do you go over here if you know you're going to end up over here?
Thank you.
Yes. Well, you can see that we expended almost $80,000. I'm sure we expended $80,000 in costs ourselves.
Yeah. And in this instance, I think it's to note too that when it did go to trial, that we were victorious by about $80,000, if I'm not mistaken.
You're correct.
According to the jury's recommendation. And this is, as far as I know, this is the only one that I've been a part of that's gone through to a jury trial, then on an appeal, and a situation where we didn't have to cut somebody's house in half in the process. This was their front yard, basically. I think it'd be really good for this entire board to be able to wrap their minds around this specific scenario for future decision making.
The only other case that went to trial on 66th Avenue is the Abazi's parcel, where we also prevailed on.
Did they appeal also?
It is currently on appeal, that's correct.
Okay.
And isn't there another one pending, 66 South of 16th?
Oh, yeah.
On 66 South, that would be the Laurel Homes project.
Yes.
That is currently in suit. There is no trial date set. We did stipulate to an order of take, so the property is ours. We're just talking about damages at this point.
And who is the new attorney for us on these types of, I mean, is it,
guy's name?
is it an outside firm?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he's out of, was it Palm Beach?
Palm Beach County, South Florida.
He is out of Palm Beach. That is correct.
It's on
And his
page
prices.
24 of their Commissioner Resort.
And their prices are up.
Bill Donnie.
Okay.
Donnie, that is correct.
Anything further, gentlemen?
To the chair, to answer Commissioner Davis's question, I believe in the memo it outlines, and Mr. Duvall, you can correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, is that after the 5-day jury trial there was a verdict of $305,000 for the full and final compensation, and then on top of that you've got the proposed $102,000 for expert fees and attorney's fees, and then you've got the county's expert fees added up to about $78,000. And in total, if I do some quick math, and I don't have an HP calculator like Commissioner Solari, but I got roughly $486,600 for the whole process.
But our legal fees, Bill's time?
Our legal fees are not included in that,
No.
in our costs, so that would be an additional cost.
And that's what I'm saying. And I really wonder just what the spread on this is going to be between what if we ever got a figure. I don't know if we necessarily got a figure to begin with versus what it wound up costing the county.
I can get that information and bring it back on the 20th.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you. On motion by Commissioner O'Brien, seconded by Commissioner Davis. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries
I
unanimously.
think just, Mr. Chairman, I think the second was Commissioner Zork.
Oh, yes.
Commissioner Zork? Oh, my apologies.
Commissioner Davis did say he would support the motion. He thought it was a very well-crafted motion, and
Well, was skeptical after knowing who it came from.
When I asked for clarification on the second, Commissioner Davis most certainly said that his second was clarified, and that's all. I'll only presume that yours was as well, since you were the second. And let the record so reflect that it was Commissioner O'Brien and Commissioner Zork. Thank you. You almost made it.
All right.
Next item on the agenda is the property exchange with KH Development Corporation, 8th Court Southwest, off Oslo Road. Memorandum dated July 8, 2013, found on pages 238 through 251.
move staff recommendation.
That's a motion by Commissioner O'Brien, seconded by myself. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Counselor.
There is no provision for a public hearing in a property exchange. As you can see, parcels are up on the screen. I would simply ask that if there are any members present that wish to address this matter or speak to this matter, that the chair would go ahead and sound the audience to see if there is anyone that wants to speak.
Upon advisement, thank you, Counselor. Is there anybody in the audience that wishes to speak regarding this transaction? Counsel, I see none.
Very good. Proceed to vote.
Calling the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. The last item, gentlemen, as I put on the agenda, recently we've had several actions here at the Indian River County Board of County Commissioners, and several of them in discussion as well as far as the Gifford Neighborhood Plan. There was action for the CRA, or discussion for the CRA in the Gifford community, as well as at a recent enterprise zone meeting, there was discussion regarding the changing of the enterprise zone, or the expansion of the enterprise zone. And such being the case, subsequently there was a meeting, a public meeting, or what is perceived as a public meeting, which has been advertised or perceived as advertised and became the attention of all of the county commissioners. And it has been talked about in the community. And the concern is that some of these actions took place by board action, which is the Gifford Neighborhood Plan. The discussion of the CRA came on election by one county commissioner, which was supported by the county commission. And then the discussion at the enterprise zone for the expansion was discussed by a commissioner where there is another commissioner as an active liaison of that committee. As the discussion ensues, there was a desire for one or more county commissioners, as I understand, to be at that meeting, if not 2 or 3 of the other commissioners to be at that same meeting, as they are responsible for, as liaison, to bring back the information, and we will be voting upon that. It is anticipated that we will be voting upon that before the public at this county commission. And the question arises about 2 factors. One is staff obligation regarding this meeting and any subsequent meeting that is not board directed. However, there are consequences to board, to the entire board, individually and collectively. And in addition, the concern is that during any path of the way that the Sunshine Law could be violated by presence at the meeting by 2 or more county commissioners, involvement by 2 or more county commissioners, or any crosstalk. We've already received emails that there would be a meeting, and someone innocently wanted to confirm the meeting, and once it became attention, I believe that we have an obligation to respond. There's no other way to do this. There is concern on the administrator's part for administrative action, as any of those type of meetings would have to have some sort of monitoring and minutes taken. And as well, there is an interest and obligation by several commissioners. I realize we're not district sensitive, but the conversation is taking place regarding District 2, the district that I have the privilege and honor of being appointed to, as well as the enterprise zone, which we've appointed Commissioner Solari, position that I held for 6 years, and now at this point Commissioner Solari is holding that obligation as a active liaison, and Commissioner O'Brien actually moved forward the discussion for the CRA. And with that, I wanted to turn it over to council as some direction for staff and for anybody who wanted to be involved with the process. I am sorry it was long-winded. Unfortunately, the Sunshine Law is there to protect you all against us, for us, to us, and to represent you clearly and upfront before the public in total clear transparency. And I wanted the opportunity to ensure that you understood that that's what we're doing, and that's why we have to present this now. Councilor.
Thank you very much, Chair. As we are all probably very well at this point, the Sunshine Law is really applicable to any gatherings, whether formal or casual, of 2 or more members of the same board that will be discussing something that will reasonably foreseeably come before that board. This issue not only affects times when we are all up here on the dais, but also out there in the public. And the first time this issue came apparent to me, actually, we spoke about it at the last Board of County Commissioners meeting, but the second time that it came up was in the context of the Gifford neighborhood meeting, and it became apparent to me that there were several members of the commission who wished to attend this meeting, who wanted to potentially participate in the meeting. Generally, under the Sunshine Law, if multiple commissioners are at a meeting and they're simply just listening to what people are saying, they're not getting involved, they're not having discussions, there's no Sunshine Law implications, there's no requirement for notice and minutes. However, if commissioners wanted to participate, they're getting involved, then at that point it triggers the requirements of minutes open to the public and notice to the public. So we were in conversations with staff, and Bob Keating was very helpful in discussing this issue, is that we thought it might be best to, in the event multiple commissioners are interested in attending the Gifford community meeting, which is what I understand, that is fine. It's on public property. It's being conducted by the county, and therefore you could attend as long as, again, minutes were taken, there was notice, And the notice needs to be provided in the general areas that you provide notice. So on the website, in this building, by your offices. The one thing that we were concerned about, and I discussed this with Alan before he left, was our only issue was in the event that the commissioners broke out into separate different little groups, which is what Bob had anticipated happening, was that then you'd have different discussions between commissioners and the people in the audience. Not everyone would be able to hear it. Not everyone would be able to be involved or at least understand what's going on. And that might present a sunshine law problem. So our advice was initially, if you do plan to attend, you do wish to speak, make some comments, it might be best that the commissioners attend at the beginning, make whatever opening remarks you would like, field whatever questions you would like. That will be noticed and minutes will be taken. But then as Bob then transitions his community development staff into working with the community into various different subgroups, then it might be best at that point to leave it for staff to work with the community and that the commissioners wouldn't be present. The next issue popped up is that there was a desire for a meeting with a civic group about the CRA issue. Meetings of civic groups are not necessarily subject to the Sunshine Law and certainly aren't necessarily done so if two commissioners attend. But again, you end up in the issue of if multiple commissioners are wishing to participate or attend and talk, then Sunshine Law issues do arise. And again, you need minutes and notice in the same manner. To follow up on that, you want to make sure you're in a place that's public, and I believe the Civic Commission meets in a public meeting, but you also need to make sure you do not have a chilling effect on the public. They feel like they need to be able to attend, that they can attend, that there's no reason they would be not invited. And then just so then you would want to again discuss, have notice who's going to be there, minutes taken, and then the question just becomes a policy question in those regards. If those are the requirements under the law, then how much do you want your staff involved in conducting minutes, posting notices, and what you expect from your staff. That's just kind of a brief overview of some of the things that I've researched quickly, and certainly just want to present that to the Commission for your discussion or any questions or comments.
Councilor, thank you. And again, I would not have brought it up if I did not perceive that there may have been some mechanism challenges that are taking place, and that subsequent meeting, even after the Gifford neighborhood, the initial meeting at the Gifford neighborhood plan meeting, which we anticipate may be a few before we're completed with that project to come back to this board. There is a subsequent meeting, and that subsequent meeting now has grown different tentacles of expectation. So I appreciate your counsel on that. We'll be looking for more in just a few moments. I see Commissioner Solari.
Yeah, on both of them, I had indicated that I had wanted to possibly attend, but I have no desire or need to participate. My idea of attending would be more simply to listen to what people had to say, and I certainly wouldn't want to do anything that would add to the staff burden, nor do I think that we ought to do anything to add to the staff burden like this. So, I mean, I've been to a number of meetings of the Gifford Progressive League, and have had no problem in the past, even when you've been there, because
thank you for not having a problem when I was there.
No, as hard as it would be for people to understand, I mean, you did keep your mouth shut. So, I mean, we're able to meet in public like that without participating, and I think that's a fine and good thing. I mean, I think we ought to be out in the community and be able to be out in the community, but just to listen. So, I mean, anyway, that was my intent. That was my thought process going forward. I don't want to participate in either meeting, nor would I like there to be any added burden on the staff because of my presence there.
And as I discussed with council, I have no anticipation of involvement at the Gifford Neighborhood Plan meeting other than introduction. As we discussed last night in the Gifford community, that this is for the people to design and engineer, and we're looking for feedback, and we were looking for suggestions and recommendations by the citizens for the citizens, and we wanted to have no politics involved with the decision process of what is to be brought up. We'll save that for later on when we do have our discussion here at the commission. and hopefully politics will never get in the way of what's right for the community. But with that, I did not anticipate any input at the meeting. I believe that I have an obligation to bring this up, as it began to be a concern within the circles of staff on what to do, on who to answer to here on the board, what we should be doing, what would be the record-keeping process. And I think that if we stand before the public and state that there will be no discussion, and thank you for that, because I have attended meetings where I just have observed the actions. There's a lot of difference about hearing and seeing minutes and actually being present and watching the meeting take place and not having input, but absorbing what is being said. So I would anticipate on being at the meeting till the point in which you're recommending that we should depart, and that's during any breakout session, because it will be very difficult to monitor, as you suggested. And as far as the subsequent meeting in August, if that is the district which I have the opportunity to serve, I am familiar with many of the situations that are taking place. We've all been actively board members who have been part of the process and serving on the committees. I think that it would be appropriate if we wanted to attend. If you felt it created a burden and encumbered the action, then most certainly I think we would have to make those claims and disclaimers today. But council, if we all commit to a non-discussion period, what encroachment do we have on the Sunshine Law, or obligation do we have to the public at large?
At this point, if what I'm hearing is that the commissioners really just wish to attend and listen, and again, then it falls more back to the original comments in the law, which is if commissioners are just attending and they're listening and don't really provide discussion or then it really doesn't implicate the Sunshine Law, and the minutes aren't required and notice isn't required. Obviously, Bob and the Community Development Group have done a great job of outreach, so they've obviously noticed it, and so certainly they want the community to be in attendance. But what I'm hearing from the Commission today, and this is why I kind of wanted to get an understanding of what the goals and objectives were of the commissioners of the Commission, whereas that simply, if you just want to listen, then by all means at that point it really doesn't implicate the Sunshine Law. It's just when you start discussing back and forth about issues, then you sort of walk into that area of the law. And I'll be happy to, I know I will be at that meeting as well next week, and I'll certainly be happy to discuss the issue with any of the commissioners between now and then.
Thank you, Council. On that, I've been looking in this direction there. Is there any input on this side of the dais?
I don't think there's any need to treat this as a sunshine, as advertised meeting and all that. I think that it's pretty much clear of what everybody needs to do to stay in the spirit of the Sunshine Law, and just govern ourselves accordingly.
I believe we've done well up until this point, and we'll continue to do that. I felt compelled the need to bring this up to ensure that the public understands our position on what our obligation is, and that we all understand what is taking place for the betterment of the community. Commissioner O'Brien?
Yeah, I had planned to attend the meeting Monday the 22nd, but as Commissioner Slurry mentioned, more in a there to listen, not to talk mode. So,
and I think
anticipate any problems
from last night's discussion. I think I made that clear. I see someone that was at the meeting last night. Did I make that clear last night? Thank you. I did get a nod. So I just want to ensure that everyone was on the same playing field. Councilor, do you have any other further recommendations for us?
Not at all. It was really helpful to hear from the board kind of what the commissioner's goals were in attending that meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, before you adjourn this real briefly, there's a packet of information in front of everybody that starts with a chart of seagrass coverage. That information was supplied by John Orcutt, and he will be covering that at Thursday's special call meeting. And John had said he wanted to meet with each commissioner individually to go over it, but I told him with our schedule today and all day tomorrow in the budget, that wouldn't be an option. So he did ask me at least just pass that information on to you all, and he will be here Thursday to discuss it, but he wanted to get in your hands so you'd have time to take a look at it before Thursday's special call meeting. And that's just...
Thank you. Additional reading material on top of the budget.
Right, so.
Gentlemen, rest up. Tomorrow we have a full and robust day called budget. We hope to see as many members of the community as are available. Thank you. Meeting adjourned. What's the other